Welcome to a brand new series. In this first show, I'll tell you the truth about the new Lamborghini Gallardo, and you'll get the chance to decide once and for all what is the greatest ever Ferrari. Plus,
tonight on Fifth Gear,
we're looking at the accident that is 10
times more likely to injure you than any other.
The accident that costs the insurance companies billions
of pounds worth of insurance claims
and injures up to 200,000 every year.
The accident that could be just around the corner.
On Fifth Gear tonight, we're looking at
rear end shunts.
Getting smacked up the...
But why are we so interested in rear-end impacts?
Well, we all know about the tests that ensure our cars behave themselves when they get hit at the front. But we were staggered to discover that apart from some stuff about fuel tank leakage and a token test for seatbacks, there's no law governing how well we're protected when we get hit from the rear.
No legislation, no rules, no regs, no statutes, not even a guideline. Nothing.
So we've done some digging and found out how well modern cars do protect you when you get shunted from behind. We'll reveal the best and we'll reveal the worst. I guarantee you'll be shocked by the result. Then we'll raise the stakes as we see the return of red aerials and remote-controlled cars to Fifth Gear when we assemble a team of experts to stage the most frightening rear-ender of all, a motorway pile-up. But first, here's what I did this summer. This is the brand new baby Lamborghini, the Gallardo, and I've just spent a day with it. Well, what a whirlwind 24 hours that was. And it all started like this. First, there was Lamborghini's own in-flight movie on the way over to Italy, a tantalising promo film shot in New York. And then a specification that was all about big numbers. A 5-litre V10, 500 horsepower, 4-wheel drive, and a price tag of £115,000. I'm rather excited. An all-new Lamborghini. Mind you, I can't help thinking they're asking for trouble because they're pitching it head-to-head with two of the most successful cars ever. Porsche 911 Turbo and the Ferrari 360. And that Ferrari is the best-selling Ferrari ever. But Lamborghini want a slice of that action, so it better be good. But before they'd show me the keys, me and the other journalists had a few of the usual lectures to endure. Chief stylist Luke Donkerwalk told us how the Lamborghini old guard think he's nothing more than the designer of the engine cover, and how inspiration for the Gallardo's lines came from a razor-sharp tailored suit and a jet fighter. I bunked off the other lectures for a snoop around on my own and discovered the gearbox was behind the engine for better weight distribution and that it had an Audi-influenced aluminium space frame. Time to bag a car of my own. Right, this is panic time. The journalists are all rushing for their cars, trying to get the colour they want, the specification they want. Hopefully we've got a man on the inside that's promised us an orange one with a manual gear shift. The fight for the cars was pandemonium, but me and the crew kicked back and watched the melee unfold, trusting our man to come up with the goods. Which colour would you have scrapped for? Plan work then. So then, orange Lambo, Italian hills. What is it they say about days like these? Of course, it's always spoilt by something. For me, the interior just isn't special enough. And as this is intended to be a practical sports car, it would be nice to have some more luggage space. The design details, though, are fantastic. But once you're on the move, it seems like forever before you need another gear. I'm still in first, and I'm still in first, and I'm doing 110 kilometres an hour, which is about 70 miles an hour in first gear, which doesn't bode well for performance driving around tight corners. Indeed, keeping it in the power band on a twisty road is hard work. You need to punch down to first, squirt out of the corner, then a quick blast in second, first, second. It's exhausting. The Gallardo corner is very flat and controlled. The damping's apparently working all the time to help you, and because of that maybe you don't get an instant feel through your bum for what the car is actually doing. A 360 and a 911 seem much more instantly alive. You feel much more a part of the driving involvement. So far, what looked fantastic on paper is turning out to be a slight disappointment. Wisely, Lamborghini had given the first drive to the local chief of police. And, surprise, surprise, there were absolutely no complaints at all as various Gallardos flew around the countryside being, tested. I headed back to the skid pan to try a different car with the paddle shift gearbox, a £5,500 extra. I'm getting used to the paddles, it blips up. In fact, it's one of the best paddle changes I've ever driven, so it is impressive. I'd still stick to the manual, but as paddles go, it's very good. Power sliding, it's not easy. You get the back out. It's got a lot of turns from lock to lock. You catch the slide, and as you try to hold a power slide, I think the viscous diff makes the front wheels grip more, and it almost takes the power slide away from you. So I'm still learning how to get the most out of it. Exercise 2 demonstrated the ABS with an instructor who found great beauty in the art of braking. I felt this was all rather beneath me, but whoops, clipped a cone. Even though I obviously like to think I know what I'm doing in these things, it's always good to do these sort of tests to remind you how ABS works, how you have to brake very hard, how you have to stay on the brake pedal and steer just neatly through the obstacles. So it's very good to keep on going back to basics, reminding yourself how to avoid accidents. My notes so far read, great looks, very safe, but slightly dull. The Gallardo had one last chance to impress. With a top speed of 192 miles an hour, it was time to let the power do the talking and give my orange manual some stick round the track. A bit of a curve. The higher the speed, the car really works much better. It's only really in the very tight first gear hairpins and second gear hairpins that the front wants to wash wide. But then with 500 horsepower on tap, this is the safest way to go for most average drivers. It's got none of the friskiness that perhaps a Ferrari 360 does have. Except when you let the understeer wind off, then kick. Whoa. Kick the back in first gear. The braking is very, very good. It's got virtual competition brakes. And with all the high-tech Audi technology, the electronic brake distribution really does work here because the nose dives under braking, and yet you don't get the rear wheels suddenly wanting to lock up. Time to give me and the car a bit of time to cool off. The main thing is it's incredibly safe, very sure-footed. It's got all the technology, even with the ESP switched off, the electronic brake distribution is working with you. But for me, it's all about feel. I want to be a bit more in control of the car than I am with this Lamborghini. I can't set it into a corner and adjust its attitude as much as I would want to. Well, if you've been saving hard for your first £100,000 car, it would be very easy to get tempted by the sure-footedness of this 500 horsepower Lamborghini. But I'm afraid it's not quite exceptional enough to make you cancel your order for a Ferrari 360. Now, wasn't this where we came in? What a difference a day makes.
After the break, some neck-snapping action as we see whose seats are good and whose aren't. Plus, we create a horrific motorway pileup. Tonight we're looking at rear-end collisions. Most happen at only 10 or 20 miles an hour. They might not damage your car, but they can give you a serious neck injury. Miss Whiplash is a cruel mistress, dishing out misery to 200,000 people a year. This real-life German volunteer demonstrates how horrific even a 10-mile-an-hour crash can be. For a split second, forces on the neck reach 10 G.
What happens during a whiplash-type crash is your body goes forward during the crash, but your head, due to inertia, lags behind. This creates damage, in mild cases, to the tendons and muscles of the neck, but in serious cases can involve damage to nerve endings of the spinal cord.
Still not graphic enough for you? Well, just imagine that the forces involved in that 10-mile-an-hour tap are equivalent to being smashed in the face by Mike Tyson. In the absence of regulations to protect us, it's the insurance companies who are scratching their heads to save our necks, hoping to reduce the rising claims for whiplash injuries, which currently stand at £1.7 billion a year. At their research centre in Thatcham, they've built a sophisticated rig to replicate real-life crashes and a special dummy to sit on it. They use BioRid, who is worth £80,000 and has his own version of one of the most elegant yet delicate constructions in the world, the human spinal column.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
BioRid has helped show the importance of seat design in the fight against whiplash. After over 300 tests, big differences are emerging between good seats and bad ones. Surprisingly, and you're not going to believe this, one of the worst performers is the Mark IV Golf. The problems with the Golf start with the fact that it hasn't got a lockable head restraint. So even if you are one of the few people who adjust them correctly, it's too easily pushed back in again. And then it's a long way too far behind your head and too far below your head. So in that rear impact, your skull just twists back over the top of it. Most Volkswagen Group cars like Audis and Skodas share a similar seat design and are relatively poor whiplash performers. But the company is aware of the problem, and the next generation of cars like this Touran are better. If you thought a Land Rover Freelander would be good, you'd be wrong. While Citroën have improved the design of their C3 seats after they've been through the Thatcham tests, and they now score well. A good news story is the Vauxhall Vectra. Not only does it have a lockable head restraint, it's also got an active head restraint. So when you're hit from behind, the weight of your body coming backwards bends levers, which pushes the top of the seat both forwards and upwards. The result is that body and head move forward together in the crash. The best seats of all, though, come from Sweden. Volvo seats have an energy absorber so that the body doesn't jerk forwards, leaving the head behind. It works so well that it's halved injury claims. But top of the league is the Saab 9-3. Not only does it have the same active head restraint as the Vectra, but it's got a slightly higher seat back, which moves the head restraint nearer your head, meaning that in the accident, the dummy, and therefore you, hardly move at all. Just what the doctor ordered. Thatcham's latest league table of seats, based on static measurements alone, will be on their website next week, while they'll be publishing the results of their moving sled tests early next year. But if you've been shocked by what happens in a low-speed shunt, join us in a moment when we put our foot down and stage a 70-mile-an-hour pile-up.
They've made you vote for pop stars, they've made you vote for books, they've made you vote for stately homes. Well, now, at last, Fifth Gear has got down to brass tacks and decided to canvass the country on the really important things in life, cars.
And not just ordinary cars. We're going right to the top of the tree. We're looking at Ferraris.
We want to find the nation's favourite Ferrari. We want to know which prancing horse is top of your lusting list.
If you could have just one Ferrari, would it be
The iconic F40, the pretty little Dino, or the modern-day 360.
Would it be the latest and ultimate Ferraris, the Enzo? Or would you prefer the megabucks technology of a Formula One car? Whatever it is, log on to our website now and get voting. The Fifth Gear team has spent the whole summer arguing and debating with Tiff mostly, but we finally managed to draw up a shortlist for you to choose from.
Now we need you to elect the winner. We'll bring you the results, the cars and a load of special guests in an all-singing, all-prancing Fifth Gear special later in the series. Go on, get voting.
We're looking at rear-end impacts. We've seen how minor shunts like these cause the kind of neck-snapping action like this. But now it's time to investigate crashes at higher speeds. And the worst-case scenario, the one every driver must fear, is the motorway pile-up. But why do they happen in the first place? There are 3 reasons.
Small nose-to-tail bumps are caused by dopey driving.
Things go wrong when a dopey driver brakes too late. The result is a concertina crash, an everyday occurrence on our roads.
Pile-ups are also caused by people travelling too close to big vehicles, get stuck behind a van or a 4x4, and your ability to see into the future is restricted.
If you stay this close, you're likely to end up with a spas all over your face.
Take the rain scenario.
It happened earlier this year on the M6. A sudden hailstorm resulted in 2 pile-ups and 60 smashed cars.
But the real headline grabbers are the pile-ups that happen not in rain, but in fog.
As the dawn fog began to lift this morning, it revealed a...
The most horrific example of recent years was this one on the M42 on March the 10th, 1997. 160 smashed vehicles, 20 serious injuries and 3 deaths. Eyewitnesses likened the scene to a battle zone.
The fog that caused it was the worst sort, radiation fog. It forms during the night, and the dangerous thing about it is that it builds up in banks and patches, so that 1 minute you've got 400 metres visibility, and the next, just 10.
The M42 pile-up started with a single minor bump. Traffic started to stack up, and eventually the back of the queue reached a patch of dense fog where visibility was down to just 10 metres. The speed restriction signs were flashing, but many drivers chose to ignore them.
Some wisely slowed down, but others didn't, and those following just the taillights of the car in front of them reacted too late. The result, 90 crashed cars in one carriageway.
It didn't stop there. A mixture of smoke aggravated the fog, and rubbernecking caused another 70 to crash on the other carriageway, and fires were so fierce that the road melted.
Shocking stuff, yet experts say some of us treat driving in fog like a computer game, a macabre test of skill.
I was driving at a reasonable speed with all my blue lights and hazard warnings showing. I was pretty horrified to find that even in those conditions there were vehicles overtaking me at speeds of up to 70 miles an hour.
The outcome? 20 serious injuries and 3 deaths. And the court of law didn't just blame it on the weatherman. 28 drivers were prosecuted for careless driving. 1 went to prison.
The aftermath of a pile-up is truly shocking, but the bit we don't normally witness, the actual process of how a routine 70-mile-an-hour drive can turn into carnage, is even more sobering, which is why we've decided to recreate exactly what happens.
We've got 18 stationary cars parked as if they'd come to a halt on the motorway. Hidden in a bank of fog, if you arrived on the scene still doing 70 miles an hour, you wouldn't even have time to brake before you hit them.
We'll be using this Metro to drive into the cars at 70. It's been converted to run remotely by James Brighton and his team. They control the steering, the throttle and the brakes. Capturing the destruction will be an array of high-speed cameras. With final preparations made, we waited for the impact.
After just one high-speed impact, there's undoubtedly already loss of life. And it wouldn't end there. Along would come another driver doing 70, about to enter that wall of fog with just 10 metres visibility and no time to brake. This is the result of just two people driving too quickly for the conditions, ignoring the warning signs. On a busy motorway, their cars would likely be followed by another and another and another. The first lunatic in this metro sort of hit that Fiat Uno only on the one side, which spun him round to the side of the door, went into this Cavalier. Amazing the footwell hasn't caved in on them, but obviously this door impact, the twisting at 70 miles an hour would probably have killed the driver, if not a passenger as well. But it's the Fiat Uno that just makes your heart go queasy, because hit first by that Metro, which stoved in the rear end, the Mercedes then came ploughing into the same accident. And this, believe it or not, is the rear wheel and the front wheel of that Fiat. As a family man, the damage to this family car is truly sickening. Again, the story you always hear, the guy in the big car gets away with it, and the fact this big Mercedes hit the rear quarter of the Escort over that launched up in the air, that took some of the energy out of the impact, and incredibly inside, there's virtually no deformation at all. You can believe, with modern airbags, seatbelts, that all the occupants in that Mercedes could have survived. But again, you look at the smaller car that it hit, the Escort. One impact has just cleaned the right-hand side of the car away, snapped the wheels off. Surprisingly, the impact didn't go that far through the pack, and it really is that first row that gets squashed. It's just luck of the draw, I guess. If you're on the back of the pack, you're the one that gets hit.
A 30-mile-an-hour warning sign doesn't mean knock your speed down to 70 and stop texting your mate. No matter how unrealistically slow it may seem, when there's fog about, slashing your speed is the only way to avoid these frightening sculptures. So next time you see a warning, remember this.
Tonight on Fifth Gear, the pretty minxy one wrings the neck of a new Ferrari, and the big hairy one asks if the new Golf is still an icon. But first, a shocking fact. Over the next 12 months, 3 million people are going to be caught speeding.
So tonight on Fifth Gear, we're going to help you save your licence.
Because, like it or not, we are a nation of speeders, no matter what we drive. David Beckham was caught doing 76 in a 50, escaping the paparazzi, whilst the ambulance car delivering organs at 104 also earned a ticket. Can you imagine being towed at more than a ton? Well, it happened.
Police found Ozzie Griffiths, the man being towed, shaking like a leaf.
And remember the reliant Robin driver who was pursued by 4 police cars?
They didn't really have a chance.
The highest speed ever recorded by police, though, was the biker who clocked 157 on the Tinchwick bypass.
But now there's a host of expensive gadgetry that claims to find the speed traps before they find you. We've decided to test them all by building the ultimate stealth car.
And when we've armed this Volvo T5 to the teeth with all the very best devices, we'll be giving it away in a competition to one of you. So you better keep watching. Hi. The Ferrari 360 is one of the all-time great road cars. They've built a racing version too, the 360 Challenge. And now, in a terribly confusing fashion, they've built a road version of the racing car. That's right, a road version of the racing version of the road car. Are you sitting comfortably? Good, because this is its story.
Think of the Challenge Stradale as a 360 GTI, a sportier car with a more direct connection to the track. The little details mean you never feel far away from the Formula One team. Even this shade of red, Rosso Corsa, is the same as Michael's. The price? £130,000.
Which is 30 grand more than a standard car. So, what does that extra money get you? Well, actually, it gets you a bit less.
A bit less weight, that is, thanks to a few materials that fell off the back of an F1 lorry. In fact, there it is in the background. They give you carbon fibre door panels, remove all the carpets, fit carbon ceramic brakes, and even titanium wheel bolts. Underneath, there's a dual-layer floor with F1-inspired holes and fins to tidy up the airflow.
The keenest viewers among you will have noticed the slightly longer nose, the slightly modified sills, the slightly lipped boot, and the fact that the rear is slightly higher than the front. All of which aids aerodynamics, but perhaps the best modification is in this window, you know, the one with the view. By tweaking here and there and painstakingly polishing the inside of the engine, Ferrari has managed to massage power up to 425 bhp, which means 60 in 4 seconds. That's a whole half a second quicker than your mate's stock 360. Show me the keys.
So it's lighter, it's more aerodynamic, it's faster. But is it any better? Now, at this point, we normally play one of our favourite disco tunes, but today the music is provided by Ferrari, and the hills are alive with it. I suspected the sports exhaust would become rather wearing, the stiffer suspension would be jarring, and the paddle shift gearbox would be as jerky as all the others. But I was wrong.
The ride, as expected, is on the harsh side, but only when you go over the worst surfaces. The rest of the time, the suspension and the balance of the car work really well together. So well, in fact, that they often tempt you into corners at very naughty speeds. Now, I defy anybody not to fall in love with that engine. Oh, it's just delicious, proper race car stuff, and you end up revving it just for fun.
The Stradale has no manual gearbox option, only the paddles. Check out the longer lever on the right, which is easier to reach for those quick up changes out of hairpins.
Traditionally, it's been a struggle to make the paddle shift work smoothly with a highly tuned engine, but thanks to the latest software, this is the best system I have ever tested. See? No jerks. Oh.
So there I was, happily playing with my gearbox in the hills around Modena, heading for Ferrari's private test track, when what should appear in my rearview mirror but scoop! The new Ferrari 456 in full-on secret testing gear.
Currently, right behind me is a Ferrari, sort of camouflaged, and I'm a bit scared because it's probably got some right little tasty driver behind the wheel. Oh, I don't know where he'll be going. Just give him a run for his money.
Nothing focuses the mind quite like being chased by a test driver who knows the roads better than you do.
This is very secret testing. We shouldn't really be filming. I think he's seen the camera. I think we've lost him, kidder.
He cunningly gave us the slip by turning left, but rest assured we gave chase and can now bring you these exclusive shots of the boot for the very first time anywhere in the world. You saw it here first. Back to the Challenge Stradale and Ferrari's test track. You know you've selected race mode when the sport light comes on. How helpful. Hit launch control for a fast getaway and wait for the call. Tiff had warned me the stiffer suspension would make the car twitchy and hard to slide. Don't know what he was worrying about.
Mission accomplished.
To be honest, only dedicated Ferrari race nuts will get value for money from the extra 30 grand over the standard 360. People like Ferrari F1 boss Jean Todt, who asked for the very first one. He also ordered the optional hand-painted stripe that costs a whopping £3,000 on top. Mamma mia.
So what we have here is a great way of feeling closer to Ferrari racing and a greater way of telling all the other 11,000 360 owners that you're just that little bit richer. I love it, but unless you've got petrol coursing through your veins, you'll get just as big a thrill from the standard 360.
Coming up after the break, the new Golf. And we fit a laser jammer to our stealth car. We're making the ultimate stealth car. Our Volvo 850 is the perfect starting point. The 150-mile-an-hour T5 was a police favourite. In Night Stalker Black, it's ideal for covert mile munching. This one has a unique pedigree. The previous owner was a certain Quentin Wilson.
We want to fit it with the best speed camera detection devices possible, which means we've got to do some testing.
We'll start by looking at traditional radar detectors. They work by sensing the radar signals emitted by Gatso cameras. They'll also warn you if a copper is firing his radar or laser gun at you. They get power from the cigarette lighter and with a bit of spit are easy to fit.
Laser alert.
Time to test our stealth kit in the real world.
We'll start with the Beltronics Bell 550, about £300, but will it detect the camera? Oh, yet at least 100 yards. Oh, it's even told me what band it is, K-band. At least 100 yards before the camera, we're being warned that it's active. Very impressive. The closer the camera, the bigger the number. But it's not long before the beeps become annoying. It's all right, I know now. Yes, thank you. I'm finished. Stop. Our next test was the Speed Cheater, £200 and elegantly concealed in a driving mirror. Right, I've got my cheetah mirror attached. I rather like it. It's already alerting me well before the Beltronics did. I really like the fact that it's the mirror, that the dash is left uncluttered, and it obviously operates with plenty of warning for the camera ahead. So the Speed Cheater had a price and slight performance advantage, but we also wanted to test these detectors with a laser gun. The bell beeped straight away, but disappointingly the Speed Cheater remained silent. The company assures us they're working on it.
Of course, you may think it's pointless detecting speed guns anyway. By the time your device warns you, the police have already clocked your speed. Well, with the help of expert Steve Warren, who has some 9 years testing experience, we discovered that the bell could detect his laser gun even if he wasn't directly targeting me.
Laser alert.
Now, even though Steve is pointing the laser 2 cars in front of mine, I'm picking up some laser scatter, which would give me enough warning to slow down if I was speeding.
But there are two major problems with these gadgets. The first is that they cry wolf. Now, the only trouble with these radar detectors is that when you get into a town centre, lots of other things can set them off and put you on edge all the time. Certainly no cameras around here. But at least it's saying... And I spoke too soon. We went past Waitrose and off it goes. The sensors over automatic doors will often give you a false alarm, which is very annoying. The other problem is that these detectors don't spot infrared TrueFlow cameras or the digital specs devices that average your speed over a distance.
To be warned about those things as well, you need a new type of system.
They're called GPS devices and several are available, priced from £300 to £500. They all work the same way, flashing and beeping when you get close to a camera. GPS means Global Positioning System, a network of satellites the US Army created to find their tanks, but which can now be used by anybody.
Each company runs a database of every fixed speed trap in the country. The device then listens to the GPS satellite to work out where you are and whether there's a camera nearby.
To ensure you've got up-to-date information, you plug the units into the internet and download the latest database. An annual subscription costs around £50. Obviously, we couldn't do a complete check on the accuracy of all the databases. It's impossible without driving all over the country with every system. However, in the 4 weeks we've been playing with the things, they've always come up trumps. But GPS-only systems won't detect laser or radar guns, which is why manufacturers are now starting to offer attachments that do detect them. So you get all the benefits of GPS plus some of the radar and laser protection we saw earlier. The combined systems we tested worked well, but they do come at a price.
Warning, warning, laser.
Our favourites are the Origin B2, which comes with laser detection for £420. The robust Road Angel is £400, also with laser protection. And the dinky little Morpheus Micropilot, with optional radar but no laser, it's £745.
Incidentally, you may be wondering whether any of this lot are legal. Here's a quick word from a policeman.
Yes, they are perfectly legal because all they're doing is providing information.
Aha! It's that time again. The launch of a new Volkswagen Golf. Mark V of a series that gained icon status early on, but gradually lost its charm by becoming a fat blob.
But this time, Bernd Pischetsrieder, that's the boss of VW, reckons that the Golf Mark V is going to claw back some of that iconic status. He also reckons that it's going to seriously poop on contenders like the Ford Focus and Renault's Megane.
In fact, he's so confident it'll become a cult, he's had the town where it's built change its name. It's no longer Wolfsburg, it's Golfsburg.
But the VW boss can't rename everywhere in the world, so what's this Mark V got to rely on? Well, part of the original Golf's promise was that its design was perfect. You know, it was restrained, classic and classless. It was as happy in Kenilworth as it was in Kensington.
But this new one, it just looks like a Seat Ibiza. Yes, it does, especially the headlights. OK, the side is more traditional Golf with a high waistline and a big thick C-pillar. But you get back to the rear and it's Seat again, especially with this badge bootlidy thing. In a world where car icons are things like Smarts, Audi TTs, Range Rovers, the new Mini, and the Megane's bum, the Golf's cool credentials are found wanting. The new Golf simply doesn't look radical enough.
Inside, it's all quite clean and elegant and, you know, quite beautiful. But it would be, because it's new. The thing is, it feels really well made, it's got lots of nice touchy plastics, and you still got those old blue backlights, which is really nice at night. But the thing is, it's too much like the old car. Nothing here suggests that it's an icon reborn.
But there's more to get sweaty about with the undergarments. These Golfs aren't just lashed together, you know, they're laser welded. Rolling stiffness is up by 35%, and static stiffness is up by 80%. Woohoo! What does that mean?
What it means is that this 2-litre diesel actually rides and handles better than the old Mark IV 2-litre GTI petrol. It's quicker too. It hits 0 to 62 in 9.2 seconds and runs on to 126 miles an hour.
But the rest of it, well, it's just not special. Things like the over-servoed brakes, the workman-like 6-speed gearbox, the good but not great electromechanical steering.
And the worst part is, they've not given us the car that's going to make this an instant icon, a new GTI. We'll have to wait until next September for that 200 horsepower motor. At the same time, we'll get a 275 horsepower V6, which is the one I kind of really want to see.
For the moment, the fastest Golf is this diesel, and you'll have to make do with shouting about the 52.3 miles to the gallon. Great, but is this the stuff of icons? Well, you never heard Elvis shouting about fuel economy. In the UK, we'll also get a slower diesel and a couple of rather lethargic-sounding petrol cars, starting with a 75 horsepower 1.4. Will it move? But there's just one thing that might maintain the Golf's status. Prices are distinctly premium. From about £12,000 to £18,000, they're £1,000 to £1,500 more than the competition.
OK, so what we've got here is a perfectly acceptable car. It's better built, it's better to drive, and it's hard to actively hate the way it looks. Trouble is, we were looking for an Icon Reborn, something exceptional. And what we got, well, it's just another car.
It's the final stage of our ultimate stealth car story. There's just one more device to test, but it's one that sits in a rather grey area as far as the law is concerned, even though it's nothing more sinister than a garage door opener.
We know the police can fire a laser gun straight at you to take a speed reading. Even if your detector goes mad, it's too late to avoid the points, as the police already have your speed. But our next gadget could change things.
You fit this small device into the front of your car, and when it receives the laser beam from your garage doors, it sends back its own beam to recognise that fact. Unfortunately, the beam it sends jams police lasers and makes it impossible for them to check your speed.
There are pictures of innocent garage doors on the box, but it's pretty clear that jamming police lasers is what it's really for.
Now, Steve, these aren't simple devices just plug in and stick on the dashboard.
No,
then.
you have to have a reasonable idea of auto electrics. There's a lot of wiring to play with, and take some time because.
Well, where are we going to put it then?
Well, the common place is underneath the number plate. So you would typically mount this unit up under here, so it just looks out underneath the number plate, so it's as discreet as you can get it.
Well, you could cut a hole in your bumper, I presume,
If you want to be more trick, then you could take out a centre of the grille and pop it in between there. You need to fit it discreetly and out the way. You don't want the unit stolen.
There were stories that they were very powerful before, they were almost too powerful or something.
Yes, there were some very powerful units out there where they used class 4 lasers, and you could literally, if you took the lens off, you could see the cardboard burn on them and everything else. They've made them more eye-safe, as they like to call it now.
Eye-safe or not, I still left the fitting to Steve. It's crucial to get it level. Steve told us he's seen loads that are rendered useless by being fitted upside down or pointing to the sky. So, after an hour of wrestling with the loom, did it actually work? I took to the road and we armed VBH with a laser gun.
16 miles an hour, mate.
Right, around the corner.
I feel exceptionally powerful with this tool.
I can see the little minx ahead of me. She's aiming.
So I've got my red spot onto his number plate.
Oh, there goes the beat. She's hitting me, but I'm jamming her.
I can't get a reading. Minx!
Mind you, I wasn't speeding anyway, of course, so keep up the good work, Vix.
Trapped!
All the gun displayed was an E04 error code, which means the jammer works. So you don't arouse police suspicions, the jammer then automatically switches off, allowing you to slow down to a legal speed by the time the police take a second reading. It's £350, but if you get pulled and Plod spots it, beware.
It would be up to the driver to persuade a court of law that he had them for an innocent purpose. If he could not prove that, then he would be prosecuted for obstruction.
Tonight, Vicky's in the latest Bruiser from Blackpool, Tom sneaks under the wire at a top-secret military motor show, and the very cheapest of new cars. In days of old, cheap cars used to be just that. But nowadays, it's amazing what you can buy on the tightest of budgets.
With only £6,500 to spend and wanting to treat yourself to a brand new car after years of second-hand hand-me-downs, what can your money buy? Well, we've shopped around our local dealers and have come up with all of these.
We can afford the 1.4 version of Seat Arosa.
There's the cheapest car in Britain, the Perodua Kalisa.
Kia's Rio joins us from Korea.
And there's Fiat's newly revised Punto. Ample discounts get you this Hyundai Getz. And Daew's Matiz comes in with cash to spare. There's the Smart City Coupe in so-called pure spec. Ford's car just makes it too. And finally, there's Daihatsu's new Charade. So stay with us to find out which is the best budget car on sale in the UK today, and have a go at winning the winner in our competition.
In the meantime, here's Vicky playing dirty in a new TVR.
Now, time for some noise. A new TVR. Excellent. The T350.
These days, we're used to TVRs looking great, but this one is simply sensational. Whether you're stood
here, 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 or even here.
The view is fantastic.
And look at the detailing. They've really gone to town this time. The interior is a ravishing feast of tactile pleasure. There are no plastic bits from a parts bin here. It's got a full complement of bespoke machined alloy switchgear.
Now, you can search all day long on the TVR options list, but you'll never find ABS or airbags. And the only traction control to speak of surrounds those 19-inch rims.
And as usual for a TVR, it costs about £40,000. So why, apart from those looks, would you buy this instead of a similarly priced Tuscan, Tamura or Cerbera?
Well, you might, I suppose, be taken with the idea that this one has a hatchback, but you're far more likely to be impressed with some of the other additions. You see, basically, this T350 is a Tamura, but it's got a roof, a roll cage, stiffer suspension, and a tweaked version of TVR's 350 brake horsepower Speed 6 engine.
It's more responsive, does 175 and 60 in just over 4 seconds.
My kind of tweaks, boys. Blackpool's latest export is exactly what you'd expect. Basically, it is a shed load of power that propels 2 seats. It has enough grunt to embarrass a supercar, but be warned, because there's no ABS, stopping this beast needs 100% concentration. Or you could just skid into the first thing that doesn't move. This car won't treat you to a limo-like ride. If you want that, buy a limo. This car is all about having FUN.
So I've decided to take it somewhere where I can play really, really dirty.
If you are a true Trevor fan like me, you will love it. Be warned though, the T350 may be for girls, but it's not for wimps.
Welcome back to our quest to find the best budget car on sale in the UK today. We've assembled 9 of the lowest priced cars in Britain to tell you all about.
But what do you get for your money? Which of these cars offers real value for money under closer examination? Well, let's take a look and award some stars for good effort. Now, these value for money stars are very important because we're going to use them to select 4 out of our 9 cars to go through to our next round.
And let's start with the price. Most of these are around £6.5 grand, so the Daihatsu and the Daewoo get 1 star for being under 6.
And the Perodua gets 2 for being the cheapest by far at £5,124 on the road.
A 3-year warranty earns you 2 stars. So that's the Fiat, the Daihatsu, the Ford, the Kia, the Matiz and the Seat. But the Getz gets 3 for its amazing 5-year warranty.
When it comes to safety, airbags are 2 a penny, so we'll award 2 stars for any car offering ABS as standard to help you avoid crashing in the first place.
So that's the Smart, the Hyundai,
the Kia,
and the Daihatsu.
Surprisingly, there's quite a spread when it comes to insuring these little gems, so we'll give 2 stars to those in Group 2.
That's the Ford, the Daewoo, the Kia, and the Smart.
1 star for those in Group 3.
And the rest get none.
The Perodua gets a well-earned star for over 50 miles to the gallon fuel economy, as does the Smart and the Daihatsu.
And if you can get from 0 to 60 in under 15 seconds, here's another. And getting there in under 13 seconds gets 2 stars for the Daihatsu and the Seat.
And for all those who've moved into the 21st century and supplied a CD player, we'll give 1 star.
To the Daihatsu, Daewoo, Hyundai and Smart.
But the baby coupe loses 1 for only having 2 seats.
So where does that leave us? Which 4 go through to our semi-finals?
Well, the car with the most stars is the Daihatsu with 9.
And in second place with 7 stars, it's the Kia and the Hyundai.
And completing our final 4 lineup is the Daewoo Matiz with 6.
Now, Tiff, that's all very well, but when it's your own cash you're spending, of course you want all the gadgets the Far Eastern boys have got. But the badge also has prestige value. That's why I'm going to give it an extra 2 stars, the Ford Ka.
Just like that?
Just like that, run with me. It's a perfect idea.
Can you do that?
I can indeed.
Which dumps the Daewoo and puts the Ford into the final 4. So make sure you join us after the break when we continue our quest to find Britain's best budget buy. Welcome back to our quest to find the ultimate budget car, where we've narrowed down our bargain buys to just 4 cars.
We can get them all from our local dealer for under £6.5 grand, and we reckon they provide the best value for money from our original pick of 9.
But now the question is, what do they like to drive?
Well, I'm going to see how they handle on the open road.
And I'm going to see what they're like on a test track. A little test track for little cars.
We'll be using our driving round to select 2 of our 4 cars to go through to the final. And first up is Ford's Ka. Now, the Ka is quite an old design. It first appeared 7 years ago. But you wouldn't believe it.
And I love the thought that's been put into the interior. It still looks groovy after all these years. Now, it's not the most comfortable ride in the world, but you can live with it. And the great thing about the Ka is it handles. It's fun to drive. It's a feel-good car. The way it looks inside, the way it looks outside, the way it drives, it makes you feel good.
This track is as tight as any inner city ghetto, but the little Ka feels incredibly nimble and it turns in much better than you might expect it to. And it whips the other way, the steering rate's good, I can nip the handbrake if I want to. And the big, in terms of these cars, 1.3 litre engine has got quite a lot of grunt, so it accelerates well through the gears, takes the bumps, and it's a fun drive, little woo, nip, woo. Not perhaps how you'd go shopping, but everything you could want in a town car. But until the front wheels lock up, because we keep forgetting that it hasn't got ABS.
The first of our 2 Korean cars is the new Hyundai Getz. And things are looking good.
It's very Euro-friendly. It looks like a European car inside and out. It handles with some poise, it rides comfortably, and that gear change is lovely. And look at the interior. There was once upon a time Hyundais were, well, the whipping boy when it came to interiors. Now, well, they've taken styling cues from our German friends. Things are a lot more plush. It feels as though Hyundai's sort of coming of age now.
Straight away, more understeer than on the Ford, a lot more understeer, wheels spin everywhere, but it nips neatly with the handbrake. So the traction's not so good, the turning's not so good, but that little engine revs away nicely. It seems to ride that bump very well. I'm impressed. It's just got a bit too much understeer. But apart from that, it's every bit as much fun as the Ford. And it's got ABS, so it'll still brake and steer if I arrive at a corner too quickly.
Up next is our other Korean survivor, the Kia Rio. Will it be a festival of fun?
My overriding first impression of this Kia is what a lump of car for the money. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. Now, straight away, it feels more grown up, more refined. It's quiet. The engine pulls well. It's a 1.3. It's got some guts to it. The ride is noticeably better. It's a much bigger car. This is an incredibly good package.
Now this Kia looks a bigger car, it is a bigger car. And I thought it might struggle around here, but it doesn't get upset, it handles well. Brake pedal feels firm and solid. And the gearbox is nice to use. All in all, that's a bit of a surprise package.
Finally, it's Daihatsu Charade. Remember, it was the top scorer in our value for money round.
I mean, I have to say, these Daihatsus have come on leaps and bounds. They're not the shameless boxes of tack they were. But even so, when it comes to everyday driving, I don't know, I just don't think I could live with you. Yeah, it might have the kit and it might be economical, but this thing, well, the engine sounds like a bag of nails. And the ride, it's the worst so far. The handling, whoa, how woolly is that? And the gearbox is truly awful. It feels like it's been made up of bits of string and metal. This is actually frightening. Whoa, nearly up on two wheels there. I'm only going 30 miles an hour.
And it's all over the shop. Oh, felt like I was going to roll it then. This has got no traction, no grip. And I'm scared to pull the handbrake on in case I end up on my roof. Oh dear. How the mighty have fallen. All noise. And no go.
So where does that leave us? Which two cars will go through to the final round? Well, the Daihatsu was a disappointment on the road and the track, so we have no hesitation saying goodbye to the Charade. But which of the other three goes out is a harder choice. We love the Ford's road and track handling, but we just can't forgive it for not having ABS.
Which means, and I can't believe I'm saying this, we have an all-Korean final, with the Hyundai and the Kia going through.
And we'll be back for our final choice and your chance to win one of these two cars just after Tom finishes his military exercises.
Two things. One, the military has the best toys to play with. And two, they absolutely love to show them off. Think about it. If the stealth bomber's so damn secret, how come everybody's heard of it?
And this place is Show Off Central, where lots of firms are displaying their wares to try and tempt the forces. It's basically a top-secret military motor show, just like going to the NEC, except that instead of stand girls, there are sergeant majors, and instead of collecting brochures to drool over, you, well, collect brochures to drool over. Now, when British firm Roush aren't making the drivetrain for the new Ford GT, they're perfecting the diesel quad bike.
Now, high-level NATO meetings have decided that it's much more efficient to have just one fuel in theatre. Those same NATO meetings have decided that to have lots of really flammable fuel dumps with petrol in isn't really that good on a battlefield. So soon, everyone is going to be running on diesel.
I can't thrash this prototype, but the enemy are bound to be petrified by such threatening trundling. A key option will be high-flotation tyres, for swamps or indeed minefields. Can I buy one? Yes, for about £5 grand. this is what the British Army towed their Challenger tanks around on, and it's simply enormous. It's also state-of-the-art. See, this trailer has 7 axles, 5 of which steer. This front one here turns in time with the tractor unit, while the back 4 actually spin in the opposite direction, meaning that although it's twice as long as a normal HGV and 127 tonnes fully laden, it can still cope with the twists and turns of a normal road. The noisy end of the outfit is known as Oshkosh, and with the King trailer, we're talking about a £1 million rig. Right. Now this is an 18-litre, 700 horsepower engine, and it's by far the most powerful thing I've ever revved. The automatic gearbox is push button, but the man said I couldn't touch it. The tyres do have a good trick though. See, you can alter the tyre pressures from up here, so if you see a swamp coming up, you can let the tyres down, increase your footprint and glide across.
Now this is the boss man. It's the Alvis ATV-P, codenamed BVS-10. But the Marines, they call it Viking.
It's the first time in their proud 339-year history that the Marines have used armoured vehicles. It's dead clever. Each of the 4 tracks is powered, and the trailer linkage is actually the steering mechanism. But the best bit is that it's an absolute doddle to drive. Any chump could drive it. So I will. The official Secrets Act prevents me from telling you too much about how the Viking works, but it'll take hits from landmines with ease, and the Marines have ordered 108, with each one costing around £500,000. They literally go anywhere. Bogs, snow, the sea, even down impossible 1-in-1 inclines. Watch this. I definitely want one of these for Christmas. It's called the Super Cat, and what better way to make the enemy surrender than by an impeccable display of handbrake turns. £55,000 for go anywhere fun. But now it's time for my star of the show. If I had an army, a real army, and not just the imaginary army in my head, well, I'd give all the troops a Pinzgauer. Originally an Austrian design, it's now made under licence by a British firm. There are lots of versions. A 6x6 will cost around 75 grand, or it's 250 grand for the advanced comms package. There's even one with a chemical agent resistant paint. Now Sarah here is Pinzgauer's test driver. Sarah, show us your moves. The Pinzgauer's genius is twofold: amazingly quick and amazingly supple. See it as a Lexus for the army. The ride quality is second to none thanks to special suspension. You can tear across the roughest of ground, but be free from vibration. Handy for transporting delicate radar equipment or even carrying out invasive surgery. Ow! Then Sarah decided to show off and demonstrate the quite astounding axle articulation. It was very impressive, but I decided to help out too.
There's a really big hole here. Oh, crikey.
Your dad may moan about the decline of the British motoring industry, but you can tell him that when it comes to defence supply, Britannia still rules the waves. Well, and the fields. See, when it comes to ingenious technological solutions rather than just massive production volumes, we're second to none. And the maddest thing I could find to buy? Well, tonight I'm going home in my Scarab. Bomb-proof flooring, bulletproof bodywork, and prices ranging from £350,000 to £800,000.
Drive on!
It's way cooler than any Hummer.
Right, we've narrowed down our long list of budget cars from 9 to just 2. The Kia Rio and the Hyundai Getz.
So the question is now, which one would you really want to live with?
Remember, both got 7 stars for value for money.
And when it came to driving them, the Kia was the big surprise. It felt really solid, cornered well,
and with its 1.3-litre engine, it wasn't exactly slow. Trouble is, it doesn't look great, and though it's got loads of space, it's practically in a state, it's all a bit grey on the inside too. The Hyundai is much easier on the eye. It's more 21st century on both the outside and the inside, where you get that CD and electric windows. Although it's smaller, there's still plenty of space for your mate, and with the seats down, it's a convincing load carrier. It doesn't handle quite as well as the Kia, and its 1.1-litre engine lacks grunt, but it's a car you could be proud of on your front drive, and it comes with that 5-year guarantee. So,
the Hyundai Getz is our winner.
Good evening. Remember me? Tonight, it's back to the old school, to a time when bonuses were big and spoilers were even bigger. When sat-nav was just a pipe dream and GTI was just about the ultimate. 8:30 on a Thursday night meant Sue Baker, Chris Goffey and me. It was a time known as the 80s.
Sit.
10 fan-dabby-dozy years that took us from Metros to MX-5s. This is our contribution to the 80s revival, our views on the most significant cars and events.
So, remember 1980. Margaret Thatcher said,
"The ladies, not a turn."
The SAS were far too busy storming embassies to write bestsellers. Philips gave us the compact disc. Rubik's had the cube. I had pink leg warmers. And Longbridge had the Metro.
Some of you may have noticed that for the past few years, Britain has been invaded by the Italians, the Germans, the Japanese, and the French. Now we have the means to fight back.
It was hailed as a British car to beat the world. Well, it didn't. In fact, it didn't even outlive the Mini that it was intended to replace. Tune!
Owners of the Metro spent most of the 80s cursing rotten wings, sagging suspension and fuel that leaked onto the rear wheel, causing the odd spin or two. But somehow it still managed to attract glamorous people. Hello, my dear.
Kapow! £250 million built the first robotic production line in the country, knocking out a body shell every 42 seconds. For all the Metro's faults, though, there was at least one plus point. It wasn't as bad as the Maestro.
In 1981, MTV launched to a flurry of fast cuts to the strains of video killed the radio star. Meanwhile, an assassin almost killed the Pope.
From then on, God's right-hand man cruised around in a purpose-built, bulletproof Pope-mobile. Every country he visited provided one. We gave him a tall Range Rover, flanked by Special Branch carefully steering their oh-so-covert yellow Rover SD1. Duh.
81 also saw my fave car chase movie of the 80s. The Cannonball Run was about an illegal raid race across America. It was written by and starred Brock Yates, an American car journalist who'd organised 5 of these races for real.
When's the last time you saw 2 priests driving a Ferrari? What, are they taking the bingo money home? Oh, no, they're doing the work of the Lord. In a Ferrari, they could just do it faster.
Most of the cars in the movie had actually taken part in the real Cannonball Run a year earlier, which they'd filmed to get extra footage. The highlight, though, is the first recorded instance of hooligan behaviour in a Subaru. The driver is, of course, fact fans, a young Jackie Chan. Ah, they don't make them like they used to.
1982 added 2 staples to our landscape. It's impossible to think of life without this pair of linchpins. And the first was countdown. The second was the Sierra.
After the boxy and popular Cortina, Suburbia was shocked by the smoothed-off Sierra. The neighbours didn't understand explanations about aerodynamics, and the so-called jelly mould was a slow seller. Made worse by Vauxhall fitting a radio cassette as standard on the rival Cavalier. Ford had lost its stranglehold on the British car market.
Have you driven a Sierra lately?
and would never fully regain it.
My favourite car from 1983 is Rat Fans, the Ford Anglia, customised by Roland. I do hope he remembered the new law that made wearing seatbelts compulsory. Yay! Good.
In 1984, trendy intellectuals drove Saabs. Proof comes from funny-fringed electro-popsters, the Human League. The car of choice for their image-conscious assassin was, of course, a 99 Turbo Combi Coupe. But synth-based endorsement or not, this was by no means the most important car of the year.
There's a car we design in our dreams. You know, the one that does everything. Sporty, but practical. Handles delicately, but is well built. Handsome, but doesn't show off. It makes sense, but it also makes you smile. Well, in 1984, Volkswagen made it. The Golf GTI. Talk about car for the people. It appealed to millionaires and it appealed to mothers. A GTI could be defended because it represented value and applauded because it went like the clappers.
It's a pocket hot rod for going to the shops in. I should know. I've got one. Everything about it is just so pure and simple. Its steering is spot on, the chassis loves being chucked into a corner, and the engine is more than willing to pull you out of it. The Mark II does everything brilliantly, but the thing it does best is remind us just how good the Mark I was.
Now, this really was the original and best, but no one knew quite how revered it would become. It's one of the great icons of the 80s, but its story starts in the disco era, baby.
It's 1973 and knocking off time at the VW factory in Wolfsburg, Germany. Nobody notices a small group of engineers who stay late into the night. They're secretly squirreling away to make a normal Golf a bit lighter and handle sharper. They're also working out how to fit fuel injection.
The idea of a sport Golf somehow breaks cover and the engineers' work is frowned upon by the men in charge. They simply don't believe there's a market for such a niche car.
But the gang of engineers continue their tinkering, and after 2 more years of late nights and lost weekends, they pluck up the courage to show their baby to the bosses. They explain that their car will have a significant performance advantage over the opposition, and this time the suits sit up.
Performance was something you associated with Porsche or BMW, and Volkswagen liked the sound of it. A people's car that was faster than other people's? Make it! Excited tales from those who'd bagged early drives spread fast. A journalist revealed how he'd kept up with a well-driven Ferrari across Welsh B-roads. Never had so much performance been experienced so cheaply with such build quality. In those days, nothing in life was as reliable as a Volkswagen.
Well, it might have been over-engineered, but it wasn't over here. British dealers had to beg for 2 years before VW would try and tackle the difficulties of building a right-hand drive version. In '79, the GTI arrived, and we haven't stopped buying them since.
There are no complex driver aids and no lardy luxuries, so the Mark I drives like a roller skate. It's an addictive little monkey. I've met loads of people who've owned 3 or 4 because they just can't bear to be without one.
On the night of January the 10th, 1985, an advert was broadcast to a nation waiting wide-eyed in anticipation. This is what we heard.
Imagine a vehicle that you can drive for 5 miles for a penny. A vehicle that needs no petrol, just a battery. And that takes the press of a button to start, the squeeze of a lever to stop. That needs no license, no road tax. And you can drive it whether you're 14 or 40. A vehicle that costs just £399. The Sinclair C5 is a new power in personal transport.
Well, it obviously wasn't a new power in personal transport. Sales struggled, and despite slashing the price massively to £140, Sir Clive Sinclair's C5 remained an embarrassing joke. But you know what? It got a really raw deal. The media hated the C5. Poorly researched reviews said that it used the motor out of a vacuum cleaner. Rosper turned round and said, "We are satisfied it's not inherently unsafe." And the papers seized on such faint praise, and safety concerns escalated. Sir Clive and the C5 were high profile and ripe for a kicking. Entrepreneur-inventor Clive Sinclair had already cracked the pocket TV and the pocket calculator. You'd think a man with that track record would deserve a little respect, even with those trousers. But it's never been cool to like C5s, so people haven't heard about all the good things. Like the fact that it was developed by Lotus. It also pioneered a simple yet elegant manufacturing process. Basically, the plastic body came in two parts that were joined by thermoplastic tape. Now that fused the two together when you applied an electric current. It's tough as old boots. You can drive it into brick walls at full pelt and just bounce off. Even the seat, which is based on a Capri, is cleverly designed so that one size fits all. And once you're in, it's completely intuitive to use. The advanced thinking continued with a front brake that was designed not to lock, so you could always steer in an emergency. Even expensive motors didn't boast ABS back then. And you didn't buy C5s from hard-sell salesmen at expensive dealerships, but by mail order or from high street shops. You feel no more vulnerable in traffic than if you're on a bicycle or a moped, but it could do with a heater. Weather protection was non-existent, and launching the C5 in bleak midwinter meant that everyone who tested one got cold and wet and chilblains. Even the optional fashion design Kagul for £35 was no comfort. Sinclair likened it to designer clothing. No, Sir Clive, no. The biggest problem, though, was the claimed 20-mile battery range. The AA said it was more like 10. But it still shouldn't have put anyone off. The average bicycle journey is only 6 miles long, and this is much more fun. If the C5 had been sold as a recreational toy rather than an urban commuter, it could have been a very different story. Compare it to this year's fad, the Segway. Obviously not idiot-proof, as President Bush couldn't work it out. And when the battery went flat on some of them, they fell over. When the battery fails in a C5, you just pedal home. The Sinclair C5 was way ahead of its time. And do you know what? We've only just realised it.
In 1986, Nissan neatly sidestepped the import quotas that restricted Japanese car sales in Britain by setting up shop in Sunderland to make the Bluebird. Not a great car. Car Magazine said the politics are more interesting than the product. But Nissan used their government grants wisely. The factory went on to become the most efficient in Europe, and Nissan are now Britain's biggest car maker.
So, what did we send back to Japan? We sent our very own Tom Cruise, a young Tiff Needell. In the 80s, he'd just started racing in Japan. After each race, he'd fly back home. Waiting for him on the tarmac was his car of the moment.
After all the years of struggling, I was finally earning the big yen. The time had come to leave the tangerine Ford Capri behind and step into a real sports saloon. The BMW 323i. Quieter and more refined than previous BMWs, it was the first to master the trick of combining achievable prestige with enjoyable driving. I was starting to take young ladies to ever fancier restaurants, and the Beamer was a much more fitting mode of transport than my orange Ford. I'd raced in the BMW County Championship and was thrilled when I could afford a road-going version. Having raced one, I wanted to own one. It wasn't just for the prestige or the image, but also for the distinctiveness of this little car. I can still well remember that rasping bark as the revs go through 3,000 RPM every time you accelerate.
And then there was the, how shall I put it, lively handling, because this little Beamer had a bit of a reputation of having a very sudden breakaway at the rear end. But for me, that was half the fun. But as the driveways of middle managers started filling up with the 3 Series, I moved on to what was undoubtedly my favourite car of the 80s. This was a Porsche Turbo, but it wasn't a 911. It's the car I miss most. The 944 Turbo. It's good to see one again.
Our hero was by now racing for Porsche. His mission was to make the 944 look like a serious competition machine, which he did by winning almost half the races he entered. What a guy.
Ah, the memories come flooding back. And the first of those is the fact that the steering wheel was always too low, on your knees almost, and almost a bit too vertical. But still your thumbs were perfectly placed on the top in the 10-2 position. Seat held you beautifully, and you sat very low, a real racing driver's position. And the big bonus was the vast amount of luggage space, especially if you pulled the top of the rear seats down. And racing all over Europe, I could take luggage for 2, the racing kit, and for the Le Mans week, the golf clubs as well. It was on those European trips that I could really use the performance of the 944. Blasting down the autobahns, the Nürburgring, I could use the mid-range grunt to persuade the German barges to move out of my way. Whilst in the battlefields of town centres like Paris, the sheer acceleration of the car would leave the Parisians staring in disbelief at this demure Porsche. But the best fun I probably had was driving across the Alps. I've been racing at Dijon and we took the long way home. And the handling of the car, the performance of it was just fantastic. And I had a smile on my face, but my girlfriend of the day and wife-to-be did complain a bit the next day about her stiff neck. Apparently the G-forces were a bit too much. Today, a nice 944 Turbo can cost you just under 10 grand. And can easily live with far more modern machinery. It'll sit at 150 miles an hour all day long and get to 60 in under 6 seconds. And you know what? I really want one again.
Come 1987, every scally wanted an XR or GTI, so they took them, without asking. Joyriding exploded, as did our premiums. Fast cars were guaranteed to get nicked and became practically uninsurable.
In fact, prices were rocketing everywhere, just months after Van Gogh's Sunflowers sold for a record
£22,500,000 for the last time.
His irises went for a new record, 27 million. And when the world's rich ran out of old masters, they turned to old cars. Young men with money to burn found their way through Kensington News to the ultimate toy shop.
Flash cars were no longer the preserve of passionate enthusiasts. They'd become the darling instrument of the investment fraternity. The frenzied speculation of the late 80s changed the way we saw classic cars forever.
Chris Routledge was at the eye of the storm. As sales manager at Auctioneers Coys of Kensington, he witnessed the soaring prices firsthand.
I mean, we had numerous situations where individuals would arrive on our doorsteps. Literally, I have £1 million to spend. What should I buy?
They were pointed in the direction of iconic cars like this AC Cobra.
It had been on bedroom walls across the nation for years before, so it was something that they could really get interested in. And a car like this, in about 1985, 1986, would have probably cost you £40,000 or £50,000. By 1990, we're talking 300.
It was an amazing time. Papers everywhere had headlines that fanned the flames.
The Peterborough Evening Telegraph. Classic Prices Rocket, even in Peterborough this was happening. Here's another one. The Scunthorpe Evening Telegraph. You can bank on them, it reads. As the bottom continues to fall out of the property market, where are the wealthy shovelling their money? Well, they were shovelling it into old cars. This is an Aston Martin DB6, one of the great British cars of the 1960s. Open road, very fast, but irresistible to a speculator or investor. Now, this particular car is one with a special coachwork on it, so it was even more irresistible. 1986, 1987, you'd have struggled to sell one of these for £8,000. 1990, £100,000. One of the interesting quirks about the boom in the late 1980s was not just the huge increase in value in classic and old cars, but the incredible increase in value in new cars. I mean, people, traditionally the new car depreciates. The old adage, your very expensive new luxury saloon is only worth half what you paid for it the minute you turn the key. That went out the window. They were worth 20% more the day you turn the key. This is it. The 80s Big Mama. Nothing represents the chronic hyperinflation of the 1980s car market better than a Ferrari Testarossa. People were buying these cars from the dealers and were selling them for twice what they paid for them before the cars were ever even built.
But they'd all forgotten what goes up must come down. A Gulf War and high interest rates meant speculators' fingers got badly burnt. It's unlikely we'll see that kind of madness ever again. William, over to you.
So there we have it, 10 years of motoring. Most remarkable, perhaps, were the things we didn't have. No electric windows, no air conditioning, no central locking. School runs weren't packed out with MPVs and 4x4s. No one had even heard of speed cameras. And as I used to say back then, good night and drive safely.
On Fifth Gear tonight, it's the new BMW X3 and the ultimate Mercedes. Plus, what happens when Tiff gets his knee down? Does it all end in tears?
Picture the scene. Life treats you well. So well, in fact, that you've replaced the chauffeur with a pilot. Naturally, you keep an apartment in a tax haven, let's say Monaco, where you also moor a big yacht. A really big yacht. But what sort of car might you be interested in? Well, how about one of these? The Mercedes CL65, the ultimate Benz for £120,000. I wanted to play at being a multi-millionaire for the day by testing the car in the hills and going for a spin around the Grand Prix circuit, but first by indulging in the interior. As you'd expect, there's immaculately stitched Napa leather, an Alcantara roof, and seats that can be heated or cooled. There's widescreen sat-nav, and if you don't like the wood surround, then specify the optional granite instead. As always, it's the detail that impresses most. Take these seats, for example. They've got magnesium frames and Amazonian coconut husk padding. And this little perforation pattern is an exclusive design. The passenger seats even got a weight-sensing membrane that dictates how strongly the airbag is deployed. But don't be misled, this is not the ultimate Benz because the interior is full of trivia. It's the ultimate Benz because of this. A hand-built V12. It's the engine out of the Maybach that's normally tuned to be smooth and swift. But the mad professors at AMG have turned it into one of the most powerful engines in the world with 612 horsepower. 612! Now that's supercar territory. The only road cars we know that have more power are the McLaren F1, the Enzo Ferrari, and the Koenigsegg. So how on earth have Mercedes made so much power? Apparently, they've bored out the cylinders, raised the camshaft lift, extended the crankshaft stroke, increased the piston pin size, improved the conrod bearings, blueprinted the cylinder heads, beefed up the oil pump, increased the injection valve openings, and fitted bigger turbochargers. Now, they tell me they'll do 0 to 62 in just 4.4 seconds. Show me the keys. It's hard to really describe what 612 horsepower feels like. You could say it's a wall of power, or it pushes you into your seat. To be honest, in a car of this size, I'd more use the word frightening. In fact, apparently when they first designed this engine, they had 1,200 newton meters of torque. In order for the poor old transmission to survive, they've actually detuned it to only 1,000 newton meters. Of course, there are a few of the modern-day Mercedes frustrations. First of all, the speed is limited to 155 miles an hour, which makes it even worse by the fact they give you a 220 mile an hour speedometer, or in this case, 360 kilometres. Then, of course, there's the fact that the V12 only revs to about 5,800 RPM, whereas I'd expected it to be some 8,000 RPM wailing music in my ears. And finally, you have to have the automatic gearbox, 5-speed auto, which won't change down exactly when you want it to. And for a real driver, you like to be able to be in control of your gears. I'm afraid those compromises and the unwieldy handling means this is a car more suited to motorways than twisty roads. But the CL65 should also feel at home, gently posing around that lap of the GP circuit that I'd promised myself. Up the start-finish straight of the Monaco Grand Prix, where on race day there aren't any speed bumps, but you'd scream under these trees at about 150, 60 miles an hour probably, braking for Saint-Devoux, which I don't remember being so uphill. Surprising in a road car. The approach to Casino Square, incredibly narrow for a Grand Prix track. There's the famous casino ahead of you, but you can't really look at it too much. Past the tip-top bar on the left, another of the little after-race drinking clubs, famed for the old days of Graham Hill and Jim Clark and Sterling Moss. Used to be Mike Hawthorne. I used to drink alcohol in those days, whereas now the racing drivers disappear into their little Monaco apartments. And of course, having turned right on the seafront, next up comes the tunnel. They make a lot of fuss about this going into the dark, but it's actually very open on the left. It's not that dark. But I remember racing Jaguar XJR 15s I raced, and this wasn't full throttle, so we were opposite looking at about 140, 130 in those evil old Jags. As we get down to these amazing yachts, which just are obscene amounts of money. They've got helicopters on their yachts nowadays. All this is reclaimed ground. It keeps on getting bigger and bigger, Monaco. And having got round Rascasse, there was always a quick, short burst of full throttle, cambered road, dragging the car into the gutter. And then this final right-hander, back onto the start-finish straight. Check the pit board, try and get some breath, because even the start-finish straight isn't straight. It just does your mind in driving around here at those sort of speeds.
My lap round memory lane hadn't warmed me to the CL65. It may be more powerful than the F1 car I raced around here, but it just isn't the sporting drive I'd hoped for. But for the fortunate 20 who'll take delivery in the UK this year, it is ideal as another sleek display of wealth.
Last year, if you were a Premiership footballer's wife, you probably had a BMW X5 parked in front of your mock Georgian monstrosity somewhere in the leafy part of town. And you probably had a tan that washes off in the rain.
It's a pity that it's got that reputation, really. Because of all the big 4x4 things, the X5 is probably the benchmark. It's the least compromised on-road off-roader. And now BMW is hoping to do the same benchmark thing with a smaller off-roader. This, the new X3, set to take on Land Rover's Freelander.
Unlike the Freelander, it's not trying to be an off-road, let's cook up roadkill and eat gravel kind of car. Instead, it wants to be a cool and sophisticated urban tool that's better on-road than the competition, like the X5 is. BMW have gone back to the traditional aggressive styling on this car. The Chris Bangle effect has been dropped in favour of old-school BM-ness. It looks like a baby X5. I'm not too sure about the deep black plastic bumpers though, but apart from that, it's pretty stylish. They've even brought back the Hofmeister kink in the back window. That's that big movement in the glass at the back, which is a feature of old BMs. Even the bonnet is longer and sculpted, and those headlights look more shark-like and less like a depressed haddock than most of the BMW range.
You know, I really didn't want to like this car. I thought it was just another mum truck designed to skank the pockets of UK housewives. But when you see it in the metal, it's so much more cohesive. It works really well. It doesn't make you think so hard as either the 5 Series or the 7 Series. It's back to being a classy BMW, and that carries through to the interior. Ah, do you see what I mean? We're back to simple BMW architecture. Everything's laid out dead simply. Speedo, rev counter, iDrive, it's gone, thank God. Replaced by simple pop-up screen and menu. Yes, we've got a lot of buttons, but we can cope with that. It's such a relief. Fabulous.
Underneath, there's BM's xDrive system, which is basically an electronic four-wheel drive that splits power to wherever it's needed, and it can disengage either axle independently. It's rear-wheel drive most of the time and only shoves grunt forwards when it needs to. And it does it quickly, because it's electric rather than mechanical.
The cool thing about xDrive is that instead of killing the ignition or breaking a wheel as soon as it starts to lose traction, it just transfers the power to a wheel that's got grip, so it's actually more fun to drive. You've still got DSC, Dynamic Stability Control, so if you're in a wet road, it'll still catch you if it all goes completely wrong, but it's kind of a background thing. It's supposed to be more fun on the road. It's also got this really cool thing called Trailer Stability Control. Whack a trailer on the back, and it'll also sort that out if it starts to go wrong. And again, it's got another acronym called HDC, Hill Descent Control, which is, well, more of a nod to the off-road.
It's about as good out in the boonies as the X5, and that's to say, not very. To be honest, it'd probably get stuck climbing out of bed.
It's not that it can't go off-road, of course, because the xDrive sorts it all out for you. But the limiting factors seem to be the tyres and the ground clearance. But for what most people are going to use it for, I think it'll be fine.
If all this appeals to you, then you'll have to wait, because it only hits the UK in spring of next year. Prices start at £28,615 for the cheapest 2.5 litre model, but this 3 litre will cost you an absurd £33,015, which is a staggering £6,000 more than the equivalent spec Freelander HSE. I know, at 8.1 seconds to 62, it is faster than the Land Rover, but that's lots and lots of money.
The X3 is a brilliant thing. It handles really well on road and does more off-road than it'll ever need to. It feels exactly like a baby X5, which is about the biggest compliment anyone could ever give it. Thing is, it's really expensive, so we'll have to leave it up to you to decide how much you really want it.
Coming up after the break, James Bond's new company car, and Tiff and Vicky go back to school on their bikes. Right, now, pay attention. There's a new Aston Martin in town and it could be rather good. Meet the DB7 replacement, the all-new DB9, claiming to be the ultimate 2+2 sports car. It sounds right up Tiff Street, promising mega handling and GT comfort. Perfect. We're talking a 6-litre V12, 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds and a top speed of 186 miles an hour. And although it's hand-built, what Aston Martin want you to know is that it's also high-tech. It's the first product of the brand spanking new factory at Gaydon in Warwickshire, where soon all Astons will be made. Rather than a boring, snoring steel floor pan, the DB9 uses an aluminium frame with the body panels glued to it by Aston Martin's first and only robot. Lots of composite materials mean it's light, strong and stiff. Woohoo! Check out the aluminium instruments and even a cut glass starter button. Although the exhaust has been tuned for the nicest sounding engine though, I can't wait to hear the stereo. 950 watts and a subwoofer that compensates for changes in cabin pressure to keep your tunes sounding A1. Bow. It'll be launched in the spring, but what the kids want to know is this. Are we looking at the new Bond car?
As you all know, Tiff is pretty handy when it comes to driving cars.
And as I'm sure you've seen, Vicky knows her way round a track too. But when it comes to two wheels, frankly, we're rank amateurs.
Which is why we've been sent back to school. Bike school. We've come for a day's tuition at Donington Park. Bring your own bike and it'll cost you £120. Or for £180, you can use one of theirs. There's no faster way to learn how to go faster.
Although nothing is quick about shoehorning yourself into leathers. Now, Vicky is what you describe as a fair weather biker, and I only ever get to go out on one occasionally. So we need to learn on a bike that wouldn't bite. Step up, current bike of the moment, the CBR 600.
This is Honda's Grand Prix bike for the masses. It costs about £7,000. Gets to 60 in 3 and a bit seconds and revs to 13,000 RPM. Crucially for us though, it's extremely user-friendly. Leading us round for the day is our Aussie teacher and supersport racer, Dean Thomas. G'day, mate.
We need to try and settle into this. You got all day. Don't rush out there and try and go as fast as you can straight away. You know, if you're not comfortable at the speed we're going, just settle down, drop back a little bit. I'll be watching you in the mirror so I can see how far back you're going.
And I'll be watching you in my mirror as well.
The great getting your knee down, which is a great big thing in bike, I understand, apparently. Are we likely to get our knees down on our first track day?
It is extremely possible. Once you learn how to ride the bike properly and you get comfortable on the bike, the knee on the ground is something that'll come naturally anyway.
And what about wheelies?
Wheelies is a little bit different.
Are you filming? I have to confess, Tiff is an exceptionally competitive person. He's got a proper grudge match going on. And I know that he's been watching videotapes of Motor Grand Prix drivers, freeze-framing them so that he can see the shape of the riders when they're going around the corner, getting their knee downs and all this la-la-la. Honestly, it's pathetic.
Come here. Old Vic's there. She really fancies her chance on a bike. She's got her own Ducati. She's fitted the sports exhaust. Me, I haven't even got a bike. Little does she know I've been looking at the master, Valentino Rossi, seeing how he sits on the bike, how he hangs off, gets his knee down. I've noticed you've got to have a vertical arm from the throttle. I've been touching up on all my expertise on the videos. She doesn't know what's going to hit her.
I don't suppose now's the right time to say I need to leave. So here we go.
I know Donington well, but not on two wheels.
My first corner. And I've survived. Marvellous.
Obviously, Dean's leading us a very sensible pace to get used to this whole new world.
I'm carefully trying to follow Dean's lines. Oh, that's so embarrassing when someone goes past.
In fact, it happened rather a lot. It seemed everyone overtook us. No matter how hard we tried, there was always someone quicker.
Hit him in a flipping car, I'll show him, and I'll drive a flipping car.
But being passed wasn't my only worry.
Oh, braking's funny too. Get off the lean off. Lean, no, too much lean. A bit of power. A bit more power. Whoa, blimey. Blimey.
Lots of blimeys, but no knees down yet. Time for some more Dean.
Your key points will be just to try and smooth out a little bit more, really. You try to brake, position your body, and turn the bike all at the same time. You need to try and, spread it out a little bit. Obviously, brake first, position a little bit, and then turn in. Just try and keep it all in stages. Yours is more of a confidence thing.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah. You just need, obviously, with the fact that the track is a little bit colder, you just need, obviously, a little bit more time to build the confidence.
Yeah.
Just to get the courage to move on the bike a little more. Once that starts, you'll go forward in leaps and bounds.
We couldn't wait to put that advice into practice.
Right, I'm going to try and start moving about on the bike a bit now. You flinch your little finger, something happens to the bike.
Soon I was passing things, and not just trees.
I've overtaken somebody.
Now we've got to go over one way and pick the body up and throw the bum over the other side and then put in the power.
We'll get Mr. Liddell.
Fluid. Roll off the throttle.
Oh, you know, he's trying to outbrake me around the corner. I don't think so, Tiffy. Cheeky monkey. I hope he doesn't put me off my line now. I can bear to fall in front of him. Cheeky monkey. Look at him going down the inside, unclean the curves. He's so cool. Yeah.
I want to get my knee down. Come on through, Redgate. Lean over a bit more.
He's got his knee down. No way!
It was true. I had. In fact, I got it down again. Look, that's me. Me with my knee down. But then it began to spit with rain and perhaps I misjudged the grip levels somewhat.
Nice long radius corner. Get me toe on the peg, shift me arse, lean in, and we have... Oh.
Touchdown, Tim. But don't worry, fan club. Somehow he survived this high-speed spill to fight another day. And, typical Tiff, he was ready for more. After a small massage, we got triple Superbike champion Neil Mackenzie to give him the pillion ride of his life.
I hadn't been on the back of a bike since a drunken stag weekend in 1979. But here, Neil and I reached 120 miles an hour on the straight, sometimes on one wheel. It was sensational.
I've now achieved 2 ambitions in one day. I've done my knee down and I've done my first ever wheelie.
And don't forget, you fell off too. Boys.
Tonight on Fifth Gear, we're looking at one of the fastest growing types of car crash in Britain. And it happens between one of these...
and one of these. It's the kind of crash that you've probably never heard about, but it's happening several times a day on our roads, and it's getting more and more common.
It's the sort of crash that can turn a pleasant motorway journey
into one of the most frightening rides of your life.
To find out what we're going on about, join us later. Normally, when I'm in Germany's Rhineland driving a sports coupe, I'm in the latest from Audi, BMW, Mercedes or Porsche. But not today, because I'm in a sports coupe with a difference. It's American. Well, actually, it's not. Because Chrysler's new Crossfire has been styled by an Englishman called Andrew Dyson. Almost everything underneath the metal is from Mercedes, and it's even bolted together here in Germany.
So what we have here is a bit of a cross-breed, an American badge on a British-styled, German-built sports coupe, which all sounds very tempting. And things get better. It may have an American badge, but there's no gas-guzzling V8 here. The Crossfire has been given Mercedes' finest 3.2-litre V6, which promises 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds and 150 miles an hour flat out, with its trick spoiler up, of course. And inside it feels like a tasty place to be. It's spacious, you can sit nice and low, the leather, the climate control, a serious sound system all come as standard. Indeed, the only option you have to pick is whether you've got an automatic or a manual. Prices are Audi TT size, with the manual at just over £27,000 and the auto a grand more. The looks are retro rather than revolutionary, but I like its rippled bonnet. The big boat tail rear end no doubt gives it presence, as do the striking alloy wheels, 18-inch on the front, 19-inch on the rear. It's even got a large boot, while the interior feels hewn from solid and offers lashings of aluminium gloss, which all add to the feel-good factor. But for me, it's the cross-country performance that matters most, and being based on Mercedes SLK doesn't exactly bode well, because let's face it, the only really good feature of that is its clever opening roof. We haven't got one of those. But it's got the SLK's best engine package, the 3.2-litre V6, which is very willing but actually lacking a bit of grunt in this sort of car. Also, when you're on board, they don't give you much music from the engine, you don't really hear it enough. The manual here is actually better than I was expecting, because the last SLK box I drove was very sloppy indeed, and the Crossfire's linkage, or perhaps the gearbox, isn't that bad at all. But when it comes to actually handling, well, it's soft. There's plenty of grip. They've stuffed an awful lot of rubber underneath, which can cope with that 215 bhp quite easily without any need for the traction control to come to your aid. But the brakes are a bit soft. There's a long pedal. It doesn't really grab the car as you'd want it to. It's a bit of a mystery of a car in a way, because it's got this macho exterior, nice masculine and styling, but underneath it's got this soft, feminine SLK handling. However, let's not forget that although this Chrysler is based on a Mercedes and built in Germany, it only really has to succeed in America, where the roads are straight and pickups are cool. But it faces a much tougher market in the UK, and good though the Crossfire may be, the fact that it can neither outperform Nissan's 350Z car nor outpose Audi's TT means it looks set to have limited appeal. But then for some, that will be the appeal.
Classic cars, have they had their day? No, they're more useful than ever for the canny driver who wants to beat the system.
For example, buying a classic can mean big performance for tiny insurance premiums, as with this E-Type.
V12s are genuinely fast. They're good for 140 miles an hour and will hit 60 in 7 seconds. But for a 30-year-old chap, fully comprehensive insurance is a mere £210.
Compare it to the modern-day equivalent, the XK8. It's only a tiny bit quicker, 0 to 60. But our same 30-year-old with 4 years no claims, living in the suburbs of Birmingham, will be paying nearly £2,000 a year.
Obviously, the E-Type wins hands down on cool, but the classic Jag has another plus point.
Because it was made before 1973, you won't have to pay any road tax either. So rather than give £160 to the government, you could spend the money on me.
But we haven't stopped beating the system with classic cars just yet. If you're a company car user, the benefits of running wire wheels and chrome are enormous.
If your Classic is over 15 years old and worth under £15,000, then you only pay company car tax on the original purchase price. Ka-ching.
Listen to this. Run a new Merc CT40 Avantgarde as your company car and a top-rate taxpayer will have to cough up £3,622 a year in income tax. But make that car a classic and have the last laugh.
Meet Jeremy Scarf, who runs a design company in Birmingham. He saved £2,000 a year in income tax by trading in his Saab 9-3 for this.
It's quite a rare car. It's called an ESO. This model is the first one they made, called a Revolta, made in the early 60s and engineered by Bizzarini, the guy that designed the Ferrari 250 GTO. I always loved classic cars and had them kind of in private ownership, but the chance to switch over to running one for the company was a great opportunity. Obviously, it's tax advantageous, but also it's just a great driving experience, you know, to actually get in a fantastic design icon and enjoy every mile of driving. It's wonderful.
And it's not just about image and fun. If you choose your Classic carefully, you can also learn some new driving techniques. Cue Tiff.
If you want to learn all about car control, you don't have to spend a fortune on a high-performance motor. Beat the system, buy yourself a Classic, and you can have some of the best lessons of your life. That's what I learned to drive in. It's a Morris 1000, which nowadays you can pick up for £1 or £2. With thin tyres and rear-wheel drive, it's the perfect car in which to learn the basics. Happy days. Oh, how the memories come flooding back. Fortunately, traction control had yet to be invented. And lesson number 1 was all about braking. You see, drum brakes were never very good at their best. And with the Morris 1000, they were average at the very best. So you learned to look further ahead to anticipate problems because you knew that when they came, stopping was not going to be easy. No ABS in those days, so you learned to control your brakes. And when it came to the handling, Sir Alec Isagonis, who would later become more famous for his Mini design, got the balance in the Morris just right. A taut chassis with responsive rack and pinion steering gave great turn-in, even if the rear wouldn't always follow the front. When it came to wet roundabouts, you could learn all you wanted to ever know about opposite lock, power sliding and throttle control, doing a mere 15 miles an hour. And at no danger to anyone, yourself, not even lampposts could get damaged. Wet roundabouts, Morris 1000 style. And once you'd honed your skills on a Morris 1000, you were ready for anything. And in the swinging 60s, nothing was better than the sexy little Lotus Elan.
So, classic cars are great to learn to drive in, they're cheap to insure, and they'll beat the taxman. And to save you the legwork of finding one, we're giving away one of the best in our latest competition.
Coming up after the break, the new 6 Series and the motorway terror that can hit you when you least expect it.
The coolest car my dad ever owned was a BMW 6 Series. I can remember thinking, when I grow up, all I want is one of these. Alas, it got written off by a Volvo driver with only 40,000 miles on the clock. I thought I'd never love again. But then I heard there was to be a new 6 Series.
I did have some concerns, especially given BMW's recent design direction.
Like the 5 Series. And the 7 Series. If you were worried, don't be. There are bits of the BMW ugly bottom family in there that'll take some getting used to, but there's so much more proportion here. More curve instead of slash, a better profile than the 5 Series. It's wide and long and low and just incredibly sexy.
It's so much more gorgeous than the slabby 5, but it still looks quite sulky, like all the frontal furniture's sliding off the front of the car. I have noticed some dodgy bits. I mean, she has put on a little bit of weight, especially around the bottom. But if you give her a bit of liposuction, you'll find she's got a Porsche 911 bottom, except in widescreen.
But on the inside, it's unmistakably a modern BMW.
Yes, when you get in it, it's all big coupe. Long legs, long arms, laid back. Big central dash, everything facing towards you, and we've still got iDrive. Okay, it's a bit Liberace with the two-tone dash, but it's supposed to be a 2+2. Thing is, you're gonna have very small children or finger mouse as a pet to get away with it.
Designed to maintain an ideal 50-50 weight distribution, the 6 stitches together the good bits from BMW's range. There's active steering, a 4.4-litre V8 and an aluminium-intensive suspension and chassis, all directed at making this Beamer handle like a dream.
The bonnet is also aluminium, helps to save weight, and the front wings are made of thermoplastic. In fact, that big heavy boot lid is also made of sheet moulding compound. I've no idea what that is, but it sounds really clever. You can only have that 4.4 V8 at the minute, but you get a 6-speed manual as a standard thing, or you can pay for an automatic, also 6-speed. Then there's this 6-speed sequential manual. Hang on a minute, that's 666 in a 6 Series.
It's not exactly a seminal sports car experience, but this Big 6 can be made to hustle in the most delicious of ways. It's got more than enough power and torque to make life very interesting indeed. At the moment, there's only the 645 Ci, which costs just under 50 grand. Not bad when Maserati coupes cost 10 grand more.
I have just noticed something though. In a 50 grand car, there's no cup holders.
It turns out that the new 6 Series is everything we hoped it would be. They've taken the spirit of the original and made it better than ever. It's big, brawny, and it goes like the clappers. And yes, I still want one.
Remember at the start of the show we were going to tell you about an increasingly common but little known type of car crash. It's one that happens several times every day on the motorways of Britain. And it happens between one of these
and one of these. The police want something done about it fast. The government's so concerned they've commissioned a secret report on it.
Let's call it the motorway truck sideswipe problem. We're talking about being punted off the motorway by trucks that can't see you.
When we look at trucks and we see them festooned with big mirrors, we think the driver can see everything.
But they can't, because there are a few dangerous blind spots.
Obviously, there's one directly behind the truck, which is why some of them are fitted with reversing bleepers. But less obvious is the blind spot further along, underneath the near side mirror. It can be dangerous for cyclists and bikers who draw up alongside before the truck turns left.
But in a right-hand drive truck on British roads, that wouldn't be a problem for car drivers. In fact, you'd only be in that blind spot if you overtook on the inside. And you wouldn't do that, would you? However, what if the truck was left-hand drive?
An increasing number of trucks on our UK roads are left-hand drive. In fact, the number has quadrupled in the last decade. Even British drivers are buying left-handers because they do so much driving on the continent. Now, with left-hand drive trucks, the blind spot problem is switched over onto the other side, the side where the traffic is, the side where you or I might be driving.
The traffic was all going about 60, 65. It was quite busy, so nobody was really going very fast. And the first thing I knew was this thud. And the side of my car started spinning anti-clockwise in front of the lorry, and you actually do remember every bit of it, because although it happened so fast, it was spinning very, very fast off onto the hard shoulder, and then sort of realised that we're still alive.
And this is exactly what happens. Imagine our track is a busy motorway and Tiff is driving a left-hand drive lorry.
Right, I'm driving along the inside lane of the motorway at about 50 miles an hour. I've been here for hours, but I'm gradually catching a truck ahead of me.
Here I am, driving along at about 50 miles an hour in the middle lane. I'm not in any rush today. I'm going to let the rest of the world zoom on by. I am aware that there is a truck on my left-hand side, but I feel safe and secure.
Right, my big moment's come. I need to overtake, so it's check all my mirrors and indicate. It's completely clear. I have no idea that any cars are anywhere near me, so I pull out.
It's the most frightening and surprising sideswipe you've ever seen. Luckily, the car was remote controlled and I was replaced with a dummy.
I didn't see a thing, and I hardly felt anything either. And as is common in these type of accidents, the car driver probably would have survived any injury, but the shock of what just happened would stay with them for a long time indeed. However, for any passengers sitting on the left-hand side of the car, it might be a very different story.
When the car stopped, I turned off the engine and looked to the side of me and realised that my brother had been injured. He was unconscious and bleeding from the head. Then it became a bit of a nightmare until the police came with 2 fire engines. The motorway was blocked off 2 lanes at a very busy time, and the ambulance, and it took them quite a long time. They had to cut the roof off my car to get my brother out.
The problem is nationwide, but the motorways of Kent are a particular black spot thanks to all that cross-channel traffic. And Cheshire Police reckon they have a blind spot collision every day on their bit of the M6.
There is talk of EU legislation by 2006 to try and sort the problem, involving extra mirrors and the possibility of cameras. But in the meantime, there are things you can do to avoid becoming a victim.
If you see a foreign registration plate on a truck, chances are it is a left hooker, so don't hang around in the blind spot. Also, if a truck has had its indicators on for a while, make doubly sure you're not in its danger zone.
If you're catching a foreign truck or one you've spotted is left-hand drive, try and look well in front of it, anticipate if it's going to catch something else and want to come out and overtake. And if possible, move right out into the 3rd lane when overtaking it, then you can be sure of avoiding this. On 5th Gear this week, is this now my favourite sports coupe? I test Mazda's new RX-8. And Adrian goes behind the scenes at Disney's Stunt Show Spectacular. Tonight on 5th Gear, we're going to be answering the question that gets asked more than any other down the pub. What's quickest? We've got 3 sets of rivals, and we're going to put them head-to-head in a series of shootouts. We've brought them to the Anglesey racetrack, a circuit which crams every type of corner into its compact 1.1 miles. There are no long straights to favour brute horsepower. Handling is at a premium. There are no great runways to excuse any errors. This is a real racing track for real racing drivers. Later in the programme, we'll pitch the Z4 against the Boxster, the Aero Atom against the Radical. But first...
It's handbags at 20 paces. The Audi TT has been the must-have coupe for the last few years. But now there's a new car ready to steal its crown, the Nissan 350Z.
Like all voluptuous young models, the Nissan's figures are impressive. £24,000 and 280 brake horsepower, all of which could leave the Audi feeling underwhelming and unloved. But this is a new silicon-enhanced TT with a DSG gearbox that pre-selects the next gear for faster changes. And it's got a new 3.2-litre V6 engine with 250 brake horsepower.
But is that enough for this to retain its top trump status?
Campus ready, prepare to flash.
A blast around the track will settle it.
Well, it wasn't the quickest thing to engage into gear and go off. So into third for the first corner. Car squirming around underneath to get a bit of grip. Over the blind brow, onto the brakes. Shut your eyes. Down to second. Nice, clean and crisp acceleration and very, very quick gear changes. This car behaves very well to being thrown sort of from left to right quite quickly.
The four-wheel drive TT crosses the line in 64.6 seconds. But can the rear-wheel drive new kid on the block beat it?
3,500 revs, dump the clutch and it rockets off the line. Into third, down to second for this one. Oh. It's a lot more frisky than the Audi. This thing just slides its rear end and it's lovely. Oh, I really like this car.
At the radar complex, the Nissan's extra 30 brake horsepower is evident, the superimposed TT being exactly 3 seconds behind.
Onto the brakes. This just feels a much bigger car. Ooh, feels like a big, muscly tank. Feels very masculine compared to the very pretty and poised Audi TT.
The 350Z really pulls its punch now, being 4.6 seconds ahead at the hairpin. The Audi is penalised by its traction control, which you can't turn off completely.
Lots of sideways stuff.
The Nissan finishes a whole 4 seconds ahead in 59.6 seconds. So the TT is still very pretty, and it's the car you'd want to arrive at a party with. But the 350Z is the one you want to take home. Rear-wheel drive, don't you just love it?
So, there we are. The 350Z is indisputably our coupe champion. But maybe it shouldn't be. Because I've just had this delivered. Mazda have rejoined the coupe party with the replacement to their RX-7, the RX-8, which, like its predecessor, features their rotary engine. Banished from our shores some 5 years ago due to ever-tightening emissions regulations, this revolutionary power plant, designed by Dr. Felix Wankel, cue schoolboy giggles, is back. Wankel's design does away with valves and conrods in favour of a triangular rotor turning inside a cylindrical housing. So there's less friction and it's lighter. But there were always doubts over its reliability, so to shut everyone up, Mazda entered a rotary engine car at Le Mans and in 1991 became the first Japanese marque to win. But whilst the reliability of the engine may have been proven, there were still a few other drawbacks that prevented the rest of the world from running up the rotary path. Notably those emissions, but also poor fuel consumption and a lack of torque for low-down acceleration. Yet I can forgive it all of that because of this. 9,500 revs. Two models are available, a 190 bhp version that no one will want, and this one with a much more useful 230. Yet it still has less than 2/3 of the torque of the Nissan 350Z and does 6 miles to the gallon less than the 225 Audi TT. Bizarrely, the higher-powered model has less torque than its baby brother, so it really does need the extra 2,000 revs and the extra 6-speed in the gearbox. In many ways, it's like Mazda's answer to Honda's VTEC. If you want some action, you need revs, revs, revs. So you're going to have to use the gearbox. But then, isn't that what real driving is all about? Of course, there are those who will bang on about how amazing it is for a 1.3-litre engine, but it isn't really, because it's a whole different concept. And in fact, when it recently won an award for engine design, it was entered into the 2.5 to 3-litre category. Good seat, good driving position, nice steering wheel, and great dials. I really love that big rev counter in the middle with the digital speedometer neatly housed within it. In fact, generally interior has got sharp styling. I love this rotary centre console. But what on earth is that display all about? It reminds me of my first ever digital watch. Yuck. Rear-wheel drive with traction control and option. The handling is very good, if somewhat on the soft side. In fact, it's more Audi than Nissan. But the steering feel is much better than the German opposition, and the gearbox, one of the best. Well, the change is spoilt by a rather uncomfortable rotary-shaped knob and a handbrake that tends to get in the way. So it's safe and solid, but no MX-5 in the handling department. However, this RX-8 does have a lot more going for it. First of all, there's its looks. It's not as obviously pretty as an Audi TT, and admittedly it doesn't possess quite the same muscular road presence as a 350Z, but as an overall package, it works. Indeed, the longer I looked at it, the more I liked it. And for its pièce de résistance, the RX-8 has something that none of the other opposition have. Something that Rolls-Royce made a big fuss about with their new Phantom. Suicide doors. Doors that ease access to the rear seats. And when I say seats, I mean real seats. This coupe is a genuine 4-seater. Added to that is the fact that at £22,000, it's something of a bargain. £5,000 cheaper than the equivalent Audi, but crucially only £2,000 less than the 350Z, which, unless you do have to carry your complete family with you everywhere you go, remains my pick of the coupe club. Still, time for one more rev. Coming up after the break, Porsche's Boxster does battle with BMW Z4 and spectacular stunt action in Paris.
Track for the Fifth Gear Shootout, where we put two cars head-to-head to settle once and for all those pub arguments, like what's quicker, diesel or petrol, Beamer or Boxster. In the black corner, the Ariel Atom. No roof, no doors, no screen, and a 2-litre VTEC engine from the Honda Civic Type R. The spec on this car brings the price to £28,000. In the red corner, the Radical SR3. Again, no roof, doors or screen, and £28,000, but with a 1300 Suzuki Hayabusa motorbike engine. Radical claim it's the fastest track day car you can buy.
On paper, they are pretty even. Both have 400 brake horsepower per tonne and reach 60 miles an hour in under 4 seconds. But which one is fastest? Come on, place your bets.
First, a lap in the Radical.
last corner. Oh, good grief, if you weren't awake at the beginning, there you are now. It's just instant acceleration, accompanied by loads of noise, shed loads of vibration. Oh, this thing is rapid. Onto the brakes, pretty solid brakes. Oh, a little bit of understeer. As you build up the speed, the G-forces really can be felt in this car. This car requires 120% concentration.
The SR3 crosses the line in 53.3 seconds. Time for the aerial atom.
Off the line, straight, up to 8,800. Third gear, first bend. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It's got a lovely amount of grip. The chassis doesn't feel as harsh or as hardcore as the Radical. I actually feel I can get out of this atom with my skeleton still intact.
Its performance can be exploited straight away, and as our superimposed Radical shows, the Atom is 0.7 of a second ahead at the radar complex.
The oversteer is much easier to handle. It steps out quite gracefully and quite gradually, whereas the Radical really is exactly what it says.
By the hairpin, though, the gap is starting to narrow. It's down to 0.4 of a second. And it's downhill from here for the Atom. The last part of the circuit is straighter, and the grunt of the Radical's bike engine helps it to catch the Atom and overtake it to win by 0.2 of a second. So, the ultimate road-legal track car is the Radical SR3. With warmer brakes, it would have been even faster.
Normally when they ask me to get involved with stunts, I seem to come off the worse for wear.
First of all, they tried to get me to parallel park. Then they put me in a car chase with Tiff, no less. Ouch, that hurt. So when they sent me to the world's biggest stunt show, naturally, I was a bit apprehensive. Seems a bit quiet round here. I wonder what happens next. This is what happens next. We're at Disneyland in Paris, under the careful guidance of Remy Julien, the man who taught James Bond how to drive. A huge team of 45 stunt drivers, 10 cars, 2 lorries, 10 motorbikes and numerous jet skis fight it out in the ultimate tyre-squealing battle between good and evil. Disney wanted to recreate the best bits of every stunt you've ever seen in the movies and show the public how it's done in reality through this massive film set. The set took 6 months to build and is meant to evoke a fishing town in the south of France. Why? Well, because quite a few top movie car chases, including some of the best James Bond films and part of Ronin, were set in places just like this. Building a near replica to a town was one thing. Finding the cars that could do the stunts day in, day out for 365 days of the year was quite another. So Disney contacted GM and they came up with these. And stunt coordinator Romwell Sonny is going to show me what they're all about, aren't you?
Are you ready, Adrian?
I am. Yeah. On y va, Romwell. Okay, that's a bit of French, my son. How many years have you been doing stunt driving?
25 years.
Have you had many accidents? Have you had many accidents?
Oh, yeah, many.
Really? You didn't tell me that. That's the worst one. Oh! Whilst all this was going on, Mr. Sonny explained this isn't your average Vauxhall Corsa. It weighs half as much, it's got a race-spec sequential gearbox that can flick into reverse at any moment, and the 1.3 engine is tuned to give over 130 brake horsepower. And instead of sitting in the front, the engine's mid-mounted for maximum skidability.
To become a stuntman on Motor Action, we train the people for 6 months and 2 months of rehearsals. You have to be very calm, no stress, very precise on your driving, and very careful. You have to train a lot. That's the only secret. Practice, practice and practice.
And once you've done months of motorised ballet without crashing, they allow you to burn rubber in the real show. Called the Stunt Show Spectacular, or Moteur Action in French. It lasts for 30 minutes and is included in the standard park entrance ticket. The basic story is the good guy enters in the red car and is chased by 4 baddies in black. After some 360s, reverse flicks and jumps, the hero switches from 4 wheels to 2. Then it's rolling stoppies, extreme wheelies, and plenty of pyro. Finally, our star turn gets back in the car and goes airborne for the closing sequence. My favourite bits were the reverse car jump, where they revealed that the car isn't actually reversing at all. It's the body that's on back to front. And the lorry jump, where they use a giant reusable airbag to break the fall. I was less impressed with the remote control car, which wasn't. There was a driver hidden behind it. Bah! All the action is filmed, there's the helicam, so we can see how each type of stunt would be shot for the movies. If you want to go, the show is on 365 days a year, and when we went, I'm pleased to report that the queues weren't too bad at all. You could say it was fun for all the family.
Right, back to Anglesey for our final shootout. This is the showdown that everyone's been waiting to see. BMW's new £31,000 231 bhp Z4 versus Porsche's £31,500 228 horsepower Boxster. Same price, same power, but which is fastest over a flying lap?
So let the Boxster set the pace. This is a car that I've always loved. The steering feel, the balance, and of course, the mild oversteer. Briefly in third, engine bogs a bit, that could lose time. But it feels good. This has set a real pace for the Beamer to beat.
Through the twisty bits, the Boxster is in its element. And sets a lap time of 53.9 seconds, only needing to use 3 of its 5 gears. The question now is, can the 6-speed Z4, which is heavier yet has a faster 0 to 60 time, take the Boxster's scalp?
And so to the BMW, and straight away I can tell the difference. I need 4th gear. The 6-speed gearbox has its advantages. Shorter ratios, the seaside sweeper in third. Oversteer like the Boxster, but a little bit more controllable, not quite so wild.
And at the top of the hill, the Z4 is just 1/10 of a second ahead, but it's still too close to call.
Traction maybe a little bit better, the front edge of the weight distribution perhaps to its advantage.
After the long straight to the hairpin, the Z4 is edged slightly further ahead, but there's still only 4/10 of a second between them.
Plenty of grunt there. Snatch third. This is going to be a tight thing. They're so similar, really. Both a joy to drive. Cross the line, 4th gear.
It was a close thing, but a lap time of 53.3 seconds put the Z4 just over half a second ahead of the Boxster to claim the shootout crown. This week, BMW's new M3 CSL. How much faster is it than the standard M3? Plus the latest Maserati Coupe and making a sport out of going sideways.
Here's something. You're more likely to be wheel clamped in the next 12 months than in any other period in history. Tonight on Fifth Gear, we are going to explain why a year of clamping chaos awaits you and how to wriggle free if you ever find yourself excessively immobilised. I'll have freed our tour bus in a jiffy. When I have, we'll be zooming around the country to reveal Britain's wheel clamp hotspots, the 2 places you need to be most on your guard. We'll also reveal a few cheeky ways of removing clamps and why the law might not mind if you do. At the end of the show, we'll meet the people recently voted the UK's worst clampers and see if they fancy a chat.
Could I just ask you a couple of questions? Excuse me, sir. Hello? Hello? Sir?
Stay tuned.
After a gap of nearly 30 years, a famous badge is returning to the roads, the BMW M3 CSL. As before, it's a lightweight model with a carbon fibre roof amongst its weight-saving features that slash a massive 185 kilos off the standard car. The engine may only have an extra 17 horsepower, but when it comes to performance, weight is everything. Just 500 of these limited edition models are coming to the UK to line up alongside the current M3, and all are sold. But at nearly £60,000, are they really worth £20,000 more than the already highly respected standard model? Well, there was only one way to find out, by pitching them head-to-head on the Anglesey racetrack.
So, let the standard M3 set the pace. We've got a SMG paddle shift gearbox, which isn't ideal, I don't think, for track work. But then the CSL's got one as well, so I guess that's only fair. For the BMW of that sort of power, there's always a little bit of oversteer. Up the hill, nice and neutral. Great traction, even with the traction control switched off. There's still a very impressive amount of traction there. Well, that should set a pretty impressive time, I reckon.
A time of 52.8 seconds to be precise for a flying lap of the 1.1-mile circuit. Now, we knew the CSL would be quicker, but the big question was, by how much?
So what can you possibly get for an extra 20 grand? Apart from a seat that hugs you to death. An engine note that is just to die for. And some handling that is just sharpened up. Up now to radar, or the auto blipper.
Already the CSL is 0.7 of a second ahead of the superimposed M3.
Slightly snappier, it's not quite so easy to drive on the limit, it's got a more of a sudden breakaway.
By the hairpin, the gap had stretched to 0.9 of a second, with just the S's and the home straight to come.
Oh, listen to that engine. I don't care if it isn't any quicker. It just sounds so much quicker.
But of course, in the end, it was, by a massive 2 seconds. And if a Grand Prix team could buy that for £20,000, they'd consider it a bargain.
Right then, back to wheel clamps. Like most annoying things, wheel clamps came from America. This year sees the 20th anniversary of them arriving in the UK, but we won't be celebrating. We know that they act as deterrents to keep roads clear for emergency services, yada yada yada, but it's the cowboy clampers who leave a nasty taste in the mouth. The punishments they dish out don't fit the crime. A few seconds infringement can lead to fines of up to 350 quid. Such extortionate fees are because of this document, the rulebook for clampers. It's totally empty. There are no regulations whatsoever and won't be for another year until licensing is introduced. So clampers are making hay while the sun shines. They've got 12 months left of charging what they want and demanding payment on the spot. Now, there's nothing illegal about clamping, but what we object to is overzealous behaviour. It's just not cricket. On our travels, we've heard all sorts. They've clamped people posting letters, Samaritans at the scene of an accident, and even a hearse that was, full. Our first clamping capital, though, redefines keenness. The clampers here bag themselves a post van. Welcome to Dorchester. This is the epicentre of local tension, Summerley Road. Setting up a clamping operation was easy. Anyone could have done it. First of all, you buy a clamp. Ta-da! Then you ask the landowner's permission to clamp on his ground. Hi, hello there. I was wondering, can I possibly have permission, please, to clamp on your ground? Sometimes they take a bit of persuading. You could have a cut of the profits. Then just think of a number and double it. Shall we set the fine at £200? Then all you have to do is lie in wait for unwary motorists, safe in the knowledge that the police can't touch you. It's private ground, so any disputes are a civil matter. There are plenty of disputes around Summerley Road. Adrian Wright fell foul the first day clamping started. Adrian, can you tell me exactly what happened with you?
Well, on the day in question, I came down here, my lunch break. I was going to buy a paper down there and get a little sandwich shop up there.
Yep.
And I saw there was a parking space here. I drove in here, probably about here, precisely, I would say. And I parked here. There was no yellow lines, nothing to indicate that you couldn't park. I did see, however, warning clamping signs in front of this cobbled area, and I assumed that related to this whole area here. Bought a paper, and when I walked back up here, some guy who was hovering around my car came up to me and said, "Is this your car, sir?" And I said, "Yeah," and he says, "Well, it's clamped."
Well, how do you know it was your car?
From what I learned later, they were hiding around the corner there, and he presumably saw me park, saw me walk off, quickly clamped it, and when I walked back, which was probably 2 or 3 minutes later, it was clamped, and he demanded £100.
And what, so did you give it to him, or what did you do?
I said, "Could you take a cheque?" And he said, "No." "Do you take a credit card?" "No." "Do you take a cheque with a card, you know,
Yeah.
bank guarantee card?" "No." "I haven't got £100 on me." And he says, "Well, there's lots of machines around, aren't there?" Or something sarcastic like that.
Adrian coughed up the cash, but you can understand his gripe. People often park there. The yellow lines come to a stop, and private road was only added a week later. We managed to speak to the owner of the clamping firm, who said the warning signs were adequate, and Mr. Wright parked next to a clamped car, so should have realised anyway. Adrian tells us he didn't see the clamp. "If I see sharks, I don't go swimming." The dispute continues. To get the residents' perspective on Summerley Road, I spoke to Franz Atkinson.
Well, actually, I don't really agree with what's happened on this estate. On the first day when the clampers were here, I stood on the road and told people not to park here. The clampers got wind of the fact that I was here and threatened to sue me for loss of earnings, and also threatened me and said if I had a vehicle that I'd better watch out, I'd be the next one to be clamped if my permit fell off. A lot of the residents like the fact that the road is completely clear of cars. As a family person, I look down here and to me, it looks like a ghost town. It doesn't look like a place where families live. It looks like the Pied Piper's been here and removed all the children and all the vehicles.
So here I am in the middle of the clamping zone, and there are loads of tales to tell. One, a local journalist, well, she was threatened by the clampers to have her camera smashed because she was caught taking pictures. Another woman, she was brought to tears when her car was towed away to Yeovil. She makes it to Yeovil, she has the money to have her car released, only to find that the compound is closed. She's stranded in Yeovil. And there are reports that delivery men don't want to deliver down here because they're afraid that they will get clamped. A rather artistic resident has been driven to put brush to canvas depicting the troubles of Summerley Road, but we can report a small success. Lovely Colin Davis was clamped whilst fetching a parking permit from his friend. The clampers have promised us they'll look at refunding him. Hurrah! Now, overzealous clamping can be pretty hard to stomach, but the people doing it can also be pretty unsavoury. Now, I have notes here saying an NHS trust fired its clamping company when it realised that the clamping company was recruiting staff from Brixton Prison. But the good old Scots don't stand for any of this nonsense. Wheel clamping north of the border is illegal, following a case in 1992 when the judge said that clamping amounted to extortion and theft. Join us in a moment when we'll reveal what the clampers want to keep secret, the ways you can break free. If you're one of the many people who hate paying wheel clampers any money, you'll want to know how not to. So here's our essential guide. Firstly, always check the clampers have the landowner's permission to operate. Without that, it's a jailable offence of obtaining money by deception. Secondly, if the warning signs are difficult to see, take photos and complain to the Small Claims Court. This firm was prosecuted for failing to display proper signs. But beware, if the signs are clearly posted and you read them, that's tantamount to agreeing to a contract to be clamped. Thirdly, if you get nobbled by one of these smaller devices, just try driving off. It's against the law, but you may be willing to take the risk in a bid for freedom. Beware of scratched wheels, though. For some even naughtier techniques, we went to the secret headquarters of an anti-clamping website run by a man known only as Alf. He gets loads of correspondence from angry clampees who freed themselves, and he now knows every trick in the book, even if they're not actually legal.
The weakest link on any of these is always the padlock. What we encourage people to do is always carry something in the boot that's going to get these off. You know, like a hacksaw, a couple of quid, hammer and chisel. What you need to do is always hit down. That padlock will always be exposed, always. Just place it on there, hold it tight, quick tap. That'll come off. Bolt croppers are the best.
Do you know what? Just so happens that I always carry a pair with me. I'd like to do it because I like to feel powerful.
See, just put that on there like that.
Job done.
Sorted.
Simple as that. For some of them, Alf showed me that you don't even need tools, just brute force. Letting some air out of the tyres makes life much easier. I did it, and I've only got one tiny scratched knuckle. For the real tough ones, though, you need to get serious. Now, what we're about to show you should never be performed on a local authority's clamp. They're much more likely to sue for criminal damage than a cowboy clamper. By all means, take the risk if you've been caught on private ground, though. A court sided with a man earlier this year who forcibly removed his clamp because he successfully argued that he hadn't consented to being clamped. What a result. And if you don't carry an angle grinder, don't worry. We know a man who does. Angle Grinder Man is, for real, removing, on average, 5 clamps a week. And he's never been caught.
I'm definitely more concerned with what's moral than with what's legal. Clamping fines are nothing more than an unfair tax levied on people who are forced into breaking the law on a regular basis because we haven't got enough parking spaces. I'm only a phone call away.
So, freshly empowered, join us in a moment when we reveal the UK's worst clampers.
Silverstone, the home of the British Grand Prix. And when Rubens Barrichello and co aren't tearing up the tarmac, it's a quiet and peaceful place to be. Or maybe not. Welcome to a new form of motorsport.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is the ultimate Japanese import. This is Drift Club.
And the first rule of Drift Club is to get your car sideways for as long as possible.
The Japanese kicked it off in the late 80s. Rear-wheel drive performance cars were cheap, and drifters would gather on deserted mountain roads, lighting up the rear tyres, sending them spinning through a series of bends. All highly illegal. But as meets grew, the police caught on, and the drivers had to find legal venues. And so drifting became formalised as a sport, with spectators, judges, and now it's come right here to the UK at Silverstone,
where today it's host to 30 drivers. They're all competing to win the prize for the perfect slide. Rules are simpler than a Premiership footballer. Just get it sideways for as long as possible. The longer the slide, the more points you get. Simple. To be in with a shout, drivers will have to hit as much as 100 miles an hour. A favourite car for drifting is Nissan's 200SX. You could pick one up for under £2,000. They're rear-wheel drive and they've got very even weight distribution front to back. And this one's got 400 horsepower, over double the standard car.
Now, Kiki, 400 brake horsepower, that's the same as a Ferrari 360 mod. Now, what on earth have you done to it?
Ooh, quite a lot of things. I think pretty much rebuild the whole thing, really.
Let's start with the engine. What have you done to that?
Just have all the new internal, just piston, conrod, crankshaft, just make it as strong as possible for 1.8 engine.
Now, I noticed the bonnet is carbon fibre. Have you been trying to increase the power-to-weight ratio?
We try to reduce the weight as much as possible, but still, the car is too heavy. It's about 1,100 kilo, but we want to reduce more than that.
How much did the whole thing cost?
I think it's about the same price of a second-hand Porsche 993.
Really?
Yes.
I mean, has it all been worth it?
It's never worth it, really. It's not worth it.
But that was the right answer.
But we enjoyed it. We have something nobody have.
And to show exactly what he means, Kiki is taking me out on the track to demonstrate the drifting technique that's known as the race drift. With a rear-wheel drive car, you turn fast into the corner and lift off the accelerator, unbalancing the car into oversteer.
That's beautiful.
Keeping the slide going requires gentle bursts of the throttle, and as Kiki expertly demonstrates, you've got to be a bit of a dab hand on the steering wheel.
Wow, that is a talent you've got there, Kiki, a talent.
No, that was lucky.
Slip and slide, you ride away, turn tight, slip and slide.
Ultimately, all this is to impress the panel of judges. I recognise him. The 30 cars were narrowed down during the course of the day, some more dramatically than others. The winning drift was this one, supplied by Brett Castle and his Nissan.
So there you have it then, more action than you can shake a stick at, and all in road legal cars that us mere mortals can afford. So whilst drifting is currently on the fringes of motorsport, it could just be the next big thing.
This is the Maserati 4200 Coupe. It's a car I can tell you about in 2.5 minutes flat. Its predecessor, the 3200, was a complete disappointment. The brakes felt wooden, the ride was jarring, and we wheezed around in our test car because they'd forgotten to connect the turbos. Well, ever since then, the cars have gradually been updated and supposedly improved. So we're back to try again. I'll start with what I don't like. The Cambio Corsa paddle shift gear changes still aren't as smooth as good old-fashioned hands and feet. The steering is lightning quick, too quick, and you find yourself steering too much in fast bends. And the ergonomics are rubbish. Do you know where the fuel filler cap and the boot release are? In the glove box. Of course. And as for the handling, well, grab it by the scruff of the neck, and I'm afraid it just lurches round like a big, heavy pudding. But all is not lost, because this car has one supreme redeeming feature, the engine. A simply sumptuous and scrumptious 4.2-litre V8. This is the proof that having a well-tuned, big-capacity engine is far more rewarding than fitting turbos or superchargers. There's no lag, no whine, no inefficiencies, just big power from the slightest tap of the throttle. Oh, it is amazing. It just keeps on revving. Don't think of this as a lazy, loping V8. This one revs long and hard. It's not massively slower than a Ferrari 360, but costs 40 grand less. These Mazdas start at £61,000. Look, it's an OK car with a super cool badge and an outstanding V8. Watch this engine's movements very closely indeed. The next place the V8 will appear is in Maserati's S-Class rival, the Quattroporte, where they've tweaked even more power out of it. 400 bhp and 170 miles an hour. How generous. Our clamping crusade ends in the heart of Bronte country. The picturesque village of Haworth in West Yorkshire is a centre of innocent tourism. But look behind the green gaze jam and you realise the genteel locals are gripped by fear of the Haworth Clamping Company. The menace in a grey escort van. Winners of the RAC Foundation's Dick Turpin Award for the UK's worst clampers. The RAC received 4 times as many complaints about this company as any other, and within minutes of arriving, we saw the boys in action. A desolate car park, just 10 minutes overtime, and a 1-week-old Mazda RX-8 grows an unwanted accessory. These clampers you're looking at are employed by the elusive Ted Evans. We managed to get a number for him, but he refused to appear, although did reveal a few things. We asked why he gives no dispensation to disabled people. He told us if they can afford an expensive car, they can afford 60p to park it. We asked why he took Marks and Spencer's vouchers from an old lady in lieu of payment. He told us she hadn't got any money and offered those instead. We asked why he clamped someone who fell asleep in their car. He told us the clampers didn't notice the gentleman, although the snoozer did eventually get refunded. Mr. Evans's responses all seemed fairly polished, but when we tried to speak to the clampers themselves about their alleged heavy-handed tactics, well, they didn't seem to hear us.
Excuse me. Excuse me, sir. Hello? Sir? Can we just ask a couple of questions? Can we just ask a couple of questions, please? Hello? Hello? Could we just ask a couple of questions? I think that's a no comment.
The natives say that clamping is having an adverse effect on tourism, and local shops have taken to putting warnings up. The Haworth clampers seem to clamp constantly and are ruining the atmosphere of a beautiful bit of Britain. We're still 12 months away from licensing being introduced for clampers, but that may not solve the problem. Theory goes that cowboy clampers will simply migrate to the next nearest unregulated industry, towing away. In the meantime, if you do get caught, don't take it lying down. Let's roll.
Next week, the new Bentley Continental GT. Is it the fastest 4-seater on Earth?
On Fifth Gear this week, Elton John and Bex have bought one and we've driven it, the 200-mile-an-hour Bentley Continental GT. Plus there's Vicky larking around in a Peugeot GTI.
Tonight on Fifth Gear, it's behind you.
We've all seen those TV ads about the dangers of not belting up in the back.
In a crash at 30 miles an hour, a backseat passenger without a seatbelt is thrown forward with a force of 3.5 tons. The weight of an elephant charging straight through the driver in front.
But is it just people who become deadly missiles when it comes to the crunch? Because, let's face it, there are all sorts of things we carry around without giving them a second thought. Things like the road atlas, the laptop computer, the briefcase, the shopping, the baggage for the holiday, a little bit of DIY, and of course, here boy, the family pet. Sorry, Woof, all in the name of research.
Yes, we're going to do some testing. We've got ourselves a motor, a crash lab and a rocket sled to investigate killer luggage. Exactly what happens to the contents of your car come the crunch? Well, join us later to find out.
Time for the most important new car of the season, the Bentley Continental GT.
Bentley used to be a bit hamstrung by having to use inherited cars from Rolls-Royce, but now the two companies have separated, Bentley's got a whole new lease of life.
And the first thing they did to turn things around was to go back to their roots.
In the good old days, Bentleys and the Bentley boys led fabulous lifestyles. They were fighter pilots of the track, full of panache, mixing high society partying with daring do behind the wheel.
Well, we had nobody to beat but ourselves. We'd averaged over 80 miles an hour. Had we really? Yes.
Yes. Victory after victory came at Le Mans.
This year's carefully plotted win at the 24-hour race is a clear attempt to tap back into those glamorous connotations. The Bentley boys would be proud. But what would they make of the new road car?
Well, at £110,000, it's just expensive enough to be reassuring.
The Bentley boys would have approved of its 6-litre W12 engine.
They'd have adored the twin turbochargers and 552 brake horsepower.
And been pretty impressed by its top speed of 198 miles an hour.
OK, Tiff, we'll get to that later. First, let's get one thing straight.
This is not, as Bentley claim, a proper four-seater.
They've made a lot of fuss about this being the fastest four-seater on Earth. But you'll only really want to spend time in the back if you're a kiddie-winkle. So if I'm in pain...
This has totally jammed my feet and ankle. I cannot move at all.
I'm never going to have children.
And there's no headroom either.
Oh dear.
Well,
it's all gone wrong.
Monte Carlo, here we come.
Not like this, we're not.
It may be short on room, but it is big on features, like the specially coated glass which stops harmful sunlight from fading your fine interior. Or the small transmitter firing out up to 3 pre-programmed signals for your electric gates, one in the town, one in the country, and your police laser garage door opener. Puddle illuminators are hidden under the wing mirrors to make for more graceful entry and exit. A touch-sensitive logo opens the huge boot, complemented by a flying bee in the bonnet.
Who needs an owner's handbook when information is accessed via the onboard computer, along with the preferences of different drivers? News of traffic jams is always available, and charmingly, the radio can't be turned off, only turned down.
It is beautifully appointed inside. European maps for the sat-nav are leather-bound. There's a clock that says Breitling on it, and other switches are like small jewels. But there's no tactile bounty from a horrible Volkswagen Group key. But at least you don't need to use it. Time for the test track.
Despite all the brouhaha about winning at Le Mans and bringing back the spirit of the Bentley boys, I wasn't expecting that much from the driving experience. Yes, there's that massive 552 horsepower under the bonnet, but this thing weighs 2.5 tons, and it really does show it when you first accelerate. You don't get a big kick in the back, but it's just when things start moving, you realise it just keeps on and on and on accelerating.
The Bentley accumulates speed relentlessly, but not once does it make you feel edgy or tense. In fact, at times, it hides its weight very well.
The 6-speed automatic gearbox does its own thing with seamless changes, and I could interfere with it with these little paddles, but I doubt if anyone would ever bother. The ride quality is very good, and I'm quite impressed with the lack of body roll. The body control is very good indeed. But where it's all let down is with this steering. It's just, well, it's as dead as you can get. It's just rather like, well, stirring a big, heavy pudding. It just doesn't communicate with you, and I guess that's okay for the sort of people that are going to buy these Bentleys. For the real Bentley boys of today, They'd much rather have the feel of their Ferraris and Porsches.
I think one of the most interesting things about the Continental GT is the fact that it's the ultimate celebrity car, a concept Bentley have courted before. The old Continental GT was driven by people like Aristotle Onassis, Henry Ford, and if you read the books, James Bond. Bentleys these days are finding favour with the likes of David Beckham and Elton John, and hip-hop artists. No rapper worth his bling can be seen without a Bentley these days. In fact, they're turning up in the lyrics more than the word gun. I have here 57 examples of the word Bentley appearing in street music. It's unbelievable. Some blokes in a factory and crew have created something that's unspeakably cool in the eyes of American trendsetters. Where Bentley once meant raise a glass, it now means shake your ass. It's an amazing feat.
But the kind of feat I'm more interested in involves speed. Could the Bentley Continental GT really do 198 miles an hour? After making a few adjustments, the most important thing is to keep tabs on tyre temperatures. On the banked test track, they could rise to dangerous levels. Rain significantly reduced that threat, but with it came an ice-like surface.
Right out onto our bowl of a test track, and no need to just go flat out straight away. Just build up nice and gently, don't razz the tyres up. Slowly pick the speed up, 4th gear, get up into this top outside lane, the maximum banking here at Millbrook, which actually allows a hands-off speed of 100 miles an hour. So we can actually spend the whole day now driving at exactly 100 miles an hour around a 2-mile lap without steering at all. But of course, as you want to go faster, the car starts going up towards the edge, and from now on, we're going to have to hold the car down. That's when the tyres begin to take the pressure, and we build up the speed. Just drop it back to 5th gear, get the maximum acceleration, 140, and even now these conditions, we're just going to start squeezing it on. Squeezing a bit more. 5th gear, the revs are 6,000 RPM, and that's 160 miles an hour. And now we need to check those tyre temperatures again.
The pressures were slightly up, but my glamorous assistant noticed the temperatures had tripled.
Oh, crikey, that's going up massively.
Despite the raindrops firing at the screen like bullets, I psyched myself up to take on the risks and see how close to 200 I could get.
Amazing how far you've now got to look ahead of this speed. You really want to feel the line of this bowl. There are some nasty bumps you get used to around about this 3/4 mile. There they are, the 1 mile mark. You remember those the next time around. We're almost at the red line. It's changed automatic to 6th gear. We're up at 160, 170. Really beginning to pull up now. I'm on full throttle in 6th. The speed is increasing slower now as that wind resistance builds up. We're getting up now to 180, all the time building speed. Now that's 190 miles an hour. Really, oh, you feel over the bumps there. It's beginning just to fidget around underneath me. And although I fully believe this car will do probably over 200 miles an hour around this banked circuit, I'm just going to ease off the throttle now, feather it down. You don't suddenly shut off the throttle either, otherwise the rear end can start overtaking the front.
It was at this point I remembered Bentley's last words to us. On no account do any high-speed runs. Oops.
So we've proved beyond doubt that Bentley's Continental GT is faster than you'll ever need. But although we like it, we don't love it.
You see, it's not as sexy as a Ferrari, nor as desirable as an Aston Martin, although it is preferable to a top-of-the-range Merc.
It has undoubtedly carved a whole new niche as a celebrity car.
But we can't help but feel that if you were one of today's Bentley boys, you'd be looking elsewhere.
Right, back to killer luggage. Picture the scene.
You're happily driving along 1 minute and then forced to suddenly brake the next. You may stop, but the laws of physics dictate that everything else might not. It doesn't take much for those innocent items strewn behind you to suddenly become an arsenal of deadly missiles.
In a crash, the effect would be even worse. The car industry and safety experts are concerned, but we were surprised to discover there's very little research and very few statistics on what many believe is a significant cause of injury and death.
So we've decided to do a few tests of our own. We've taken this typical family car, taken off the doors, cut out the roof to get a better view, and mounted it on this high-G sled to subject it to the sort of forces you'd experience in a head-on crash at just 30 miles an hour. That kind of speed is enough to generate an unbelievable 30G. So we've strengthened the floor to repeat the tests without buckling the body. And we have our usual £1,000,000 array of ruggedised high-speed cameras capturing the action. Our tests won't be rigorously scientific, but they will be all over in the blink of an eye. In order to simulate that deceleration, we use the sled to accelerate the car with the same force backwards.
Time for test one. We'll start with a typical scenario. Laptop and nice, solid, reassuring road atlases on the parcel shelf, smart attaché case from Auntie here, bit of shopping everywhere, and of course, Woof comes too.
As we said, tests like these are rare. So to help analyse the results, we've enlisted crash expert Andrew Beach. Stand by, everyone. It's absolute carnage. A road atlas smashes the windscreen and the front seats get pummeled. But what's the expert's view on our first crash?
Although the car is effectively stopped, all the contents are carrying on at 30 miles an hour and they'll continue to move until they hit something. Now on this occasion you can see everything on the parcel shelf has actually flown all the way forwards. Luckily for the occupants in the front, they haven't hit them. But you may not be quite so lucky. In the case of the briefcase, you can see it actually burst open and the shopping has gone well into pieces.
But I mean, the one thing I've really noticed, as long as you keep everything on the seat itself or down behind those front seats, it does tend to stay in the rear compartment.
If you keep it low, particularly in the footwell behind the front seats, OK, there's quite a mess down there, but it actually hasn't moved forward at all, hasn't come into the front area where the passengers are and hasn't caused any damage.
But replay the stuff from the parcel shelf is just like a conveyor belt straight through the middle.
That's right, you've basically got a series of missiles that are heading forwards at 30 miles an hour.
So don't put anything heavy on your parcel shelf.
That would be my advice.
After all that, you might think you'd be better off putting heavy items in the boot. Well, join us in a moment for our next test, because it might make you think again. We're looking at killer luggage, and after our first test, you may think that the safest place to store heavy items is in the boot. You probably think it's as safe as a vault.
Well, we decided to find out with a typical boot full of DIY paraphernalia. One 30-mile-an-hour crash coming right up.
3, 2, 1.
The toolbox bursts open, hurtling its contents in all directions.
In the early part of the test, the rear seats are actually opening just under their own inertia, but they only reach a certain level. Then just a few milliseconds later, the toolbox arrives like a battering ram. If you look at the rear seats, they've now been forced open such that the back of the seat is really touching the side of the door.
And that toolbox weighs about 15 kilos in reality. What does it effectively weigh there?
Well, this, as we said, is a 30-mile-an-hour crash, generating roughly 30 Gs. So that's got an effective mass of 450 kilograms, nearly half a tonne.
So a child in the back will be hit by a half-tonne toolbox?
Well, effectively, yes. Anybody sitting in the back seat of that car would be taking that force through the seat belts and they'd be suffering that through their chest.
Now, our car was quite old, but newer cars have to pass a test with two 18-kilo blocks in the boot, so they should withhold stampeding luggage more effectively. Cars with a central three-point belt also have seats made of sturdier stuff. In fact, when there are no passengers in the back, it's a good idea to fasten the rear belts as they strengthen the seat enormously, and make sure heavy items are placed side-on, in a corner and close to the seat to minimise the battering ram effect. If you've got a luggage net, use it. Even a flimsy one will help absorb some energy.
Well, we've got one test to go, the really bulky items. Ever felt threatened by your kitchen sink? No? Well, think again. Join us in a moment.
The Peugeot 206 GTI 180. A twin pipes and chrome pedals remix of the standard 206 GTI, which has been around for 4 years now. A car that's always been good to look at, but has never generated much excitement or respect. To tackle the problem, this car has had its power uprated from 138 bhp to 180 using variable valve timing here, while in here, the driving position has been improved to ensure that you can drive your GTI without getting cramp, like you did in the old one. The throw of the gear stick has been shortened and the ratios have been tweaked, so takeoffs are sharper and more race-like. Good news so far, then. At 15 grand, this 206 is similar in price to Renault's Clio 172 and £1,000 cheaper than Honda's Civic Type R. But the Pug is not particularly quick. It takes 7.4 seconds to hit 62 miles an hour, which is comfortably beaten by the Honda's 6.8 seconds. So, to really impress, this 206 needs to be a mega entertaining drive. Cornering and handling are much improved when compared to the entry-level GTI. But this steering wheel is too big for my liking, and it doesn't react quickly enough to my commands, especially around this twisty little track here. Honda's Civic Type R and Renault's Clio are much friskier, more agile. They're sort of hungrier for more thrills. Whereas this, it is a very steady car, but it just feels like I'm thrashing my granny. Sorry, Granny. This is exceptionally sturdy, well-priced, and is packed with safety gear. But with rougher and tougher rivals on the market, the only title this GTI can lay claim to is the pretty boy of the pack.
Welcome back to the world of out-of-control luggage. We've seen the dangers of casually stowed everyday items. Now it's time for something bigger.
You've been to the Flat Pack furniture store for some choice bits of MDF and chipboard. In fact, everything and the kitchen sink. But it's not just the confusing instructions that could ruin your weekend. Watch what happens when you crash at only 30 miles an hour. The folded rear seats act like a launch pad, firing the flat packs straight at your head. The forces involved are enough to bend the sink. Even at a relatively low 30 miles an hour, blunt objects become guillotines.
Well, in our simulated accident, the DIY shopping has destroyed the interior of this car. And I wouldn't fancy to being the driver the way that MDF has sliced into the back of the seat. The sink right the way through between the two front seats. Next time I'm asked to fit a new kitchen, I'll get it delivered.
So there you have it. Who'd have thought a soft toy, some spanners and a sink could be such lethal travelling companions? And don't worry, no animals were harmed in the making of this programme. Tonight on Fifth Gear, we're going totally Ferraris.
That's right, we're devoting the entire programme to a marque that evokes speed, beauty and passion more than any other in the history of motoring.
A few weeks ago, we asked you to vote on our website for your favourite Ferrari, the one you'd most like to have in your garage.
And tonight, we're going to reveal those results.
Your top 10 favourite Ferraris.
But before we reveal which ones came where, what is it about this prancing horse that really gets the blood flowing?
Well, it all began over half a century ago with this man, Enzo Ferrari. Initially a driver for Alfa Romeo, his obsession with racing spurred him to go solo. Adopting the squadron badge of a famous Italian fighter pilot, Enzo built his own factory in Maranello, near Modena, Italy.
And since those early days in the 40s, the racing track has been pretty good to Enzo. Ferrari have won the World Sports Car Championship 13 times and carried their drivers to 13 Formula One world titles. But fun as it is, racing is far from cheap. So to fund his addiction, Enzo had to start selling road cars. Fast, expensive and exclusive road cars.
So, which Ferrari is the nation's favourite? Well, in a radical move, we've decided to start at number 10 and work our way to the top.
And kicking off our ranking in 10th place is the Dino. And because of its legendary styling and great handling, it undoubtedly deserves a position in the nation's favourites. But there's one angry man who thinks it should have come higher.
I mean, look at it. It's the first Ferrari road car I ever fell in love with. It was their first mid-engine production car, and it's got such beautifully proportioned lines, you just want to take it to bed with you. It was also the first Ferrari I ever drove, and the first that didn't need an element of bravery to drive it. OK, I know it's only got 198 horsepower and you get that sort of figure in a hot hatch nowadays. I have to remember when I first borrowed one from a friend who was slightly better off than I was, I stepped straight from a Morris 1000 into a Ferrari Dino. And believe me, 188 horsepower then felt like an awful lot. Of course, in modern terms, it's not the most brilliant of drives. It's got this awful Italian driving position with a steering wheel right down on my knees. But you tend to forgive it all of that just because you love it so. Handling-wise, it was very safe and solid mid-engine, a bit of mild understeer, no sudden oversteer that the Ferraris of before have been more famous for. And of course, all the time whilst you're driving, you're peering between those two beautiful, curvaceous front wings. So the Dino was my childhood sweetheart. And it's also the first of 3 cars in the top 10 to benefit from a bit of screen magic. In their early 70s TV series The Persuaders, Roger Moore and Tony Curtis played wealthy playboys who, in the south of France for the opening episode, couldn't resist a little race. While Moore's Aston DBS obviously had more straight-line grunt, it was simply no match for the Dino when the straights turned into bends. Just goes to show the power of TV to make cars into legends.
By the time Ferrari stopped making the Dino in 1974, they'd sold 3,000 of them, and it's still one of the best-known classic Ferraris today.
But not all of your favourite Ferraris were mass-produced. In fact, your 9th placed car is one of only 3 ever built. This is a 330 P4, which apparently won some races somewhere. Thank you, viewers, for bringing it to my attention.
Tom, this car didn't just win a few races. This is the car that restored Italy's pride.
In 1966, Ford arrived with their GT40 and stole Ferrari's world sports car crown. This car, in 1967, the P4, won it back for them.
Well, hang on, Tiff, it said at Le Mans in 1967 it was beaten by the Ford.
That's just Le Mans. One round of the World Championship where the great long straights of Le Mans allowed the Detroit muscle to beat it in that race. But around corners, the P4 outhandled the GT40. And let's face it, it's 10 times more beautiful than that Detroit brick.
Yes, boys, but I think the nation's number 8 favourite Ferrari is even better to look at. It's the 250 GT California Spider. I'd call it irresistible. Now, there's probably no such thing as an undesirable Ferrari, but when it's a classically styled two-seater roadster from the 1950s, it's about as glamorous as you can get. The California Spider is unashamedly gorgeous. Every crease, every curve, every catch and every shut line gives nothing but sheer visual pleasure. Aimed primarily at the American market, hence the name, it was built to cruise rather than race. But you can't ignore the fact that it's still capable of 135 miles an hour and will nail 60 in around 7 seconds, which is pretty impressive for something from the 1950s. But not for 1 second do I feel the need to gun that lazy V12. All I want to do is sit back, stroke the throttle and pretend I'm Audrey Hepburn all day long. And I'm sure it does live up to its romantic promise on a warm summer's evening, because even on a cold December day in London, it gets its fair share of admiring glances. So, how much do you have to pay to be eternally in vogue? Well, according to one of only 3 owners in the UK, the price of entry to the California Spider Club is between £600,000 and £1 million.
The California Spider is undoubtedly a very beautiful car, but the car that you voted in at number 7 is what many people consider to be Enzo Ferrari's masterpiece. This little puppy, probably the most expensive thing I've ever touched, is a 250 GTO. Cost to you, £5 million, and that's if you can find one. Record auction price, £10 million.
The GTO was born in 1963 to meet new racing homologation rules. Enzo got his engineer, Giotto Bizzarini, to style the car rather than the usual Pininfarina. And didn't he do well?
The 250 GTO is one of those cars that's so valuable that there's still a market for accurate replicas. Not this one, though. This is one of the multi-million-pound originals.
But why spend millions on an old Ferrari when you can buy a new one, which is arguably better engineered, probably laps faster than the GTO, and costs only £100,000?
Could we stay right here till the end of time? Earth stops turning when I love you till the seas run dry.
The 360 Modena, which you placed 6th in your top 10 favourite Ferraris, is also one of my favourites. And here's why. Most people think of Italian supercars as big, beefy beasts that you have to be a hero to drive, but the 360 just isn't like that. It's beautifully balanced, so anyone can jump in and have a go. And if you want a little bit of fun, well, that does take a bit more skill. But it's so beautifully balanced, I could just play with it like that, balancing it between the spinning rear wheels and the opposite lock. That's what you want for driver satisfaction. Obviously, I get to drive lots of fabulous cars in my job. But even then, some of them, well, you've sort of had enough of them after a day or two. Good they may be, but in the end, they're just another car. A Ferrari is a totally different thing. It's something I just want to drive all day long because it just never ceases to lose the smile on my face.
So, Tiff, sounds nice, goes sideways really well.
Sounds nice, because it's beautiful. I mean, look at the engine sitting there just waiting to be driven. It's fabulous.
Well, no, I mean, all the Premiership footballers have them. It's a bit, you know, common.
Look, yes, they can afford them, and it's all about it's an affordable Ferrari. Just because it's common doesn't mean to say it's not wonderful to drive.
No, it's the motoring equivalent of having a gold tooth.
No, just so you want all Ferraris to cost millions, so only rock stars can buy them.
Well, they should be dream vehicles.
I want to dream about it. I want to drive one. This is a Ferrari to be
Join us
driven.
after the break when it gets even better. We'll be revealing your top 5 favourite Ferraris.
Welcome back to the nation's favourite Ferraris. In the countdown, you put the Dino at 10. At 9 was the P4. The California Spider came in at 8. The 250 GTO was number 7. And you put my favourite, the 360, in at 6. So what's at number 5?
Once upon a time, some blokes who built tractors decided to take on Ferrari and build a supercar. That supercar was the Lamborghini Miura. Now, the chaps down at Maranello thought that a mid-engined car was a bit nouveau, so they hit back and produced yet another brand new front-engined rear-drive GT. Say hello to the 365 GTB4.
Well, actually, Vix, that name was tediously long, so everyone called it the Daytona, because Ferrari had just won 1, 2, 3 in the famous race.
She's enough to make you want to choke on your chips. Styled by a guy called Leonardo Fioravanti at Pininfarina, and I still think we ought to build a small church and worship him as an automotive god. There's so many complex curves, so much neatness in the detail that the whole thing had to be hand-beaten on a wooden truck. There are no sheet pressings in a Daytona. She's a very high-maintenance mistress. Inside, I think it's about the coolest car I've ever seen. I know it looks a bit mad with all these dials everywhere, but it still makes you want to smoke out the side of your mouth and speak with an Italian accent. Bella macchina, ciao bella. But there is one thing I've just got to show you. Check this out, my friends. It is a 4.4-litre V12 running on carburettors. And in the days of plastic engine covers, an engine with all its guts on display is... She actually handles quite well in the context of how old she is. But this steering's really, really heavy. It'll build your arms up no end, and the clutch you really have to push down quite hard. It's also, you can see out over that massively long bonnet, and you find out that it's got no bumpers, so it's not really a town car, but it's at its best on the open road. God, this is an effort.
But heavy steering or not, the movie set loved them. James Garner ran a 73 Coupe, Sonny and Cher had a Spider. Well, they were cool back then. The Daytona was conspicuous consumption for the free love generation.
And at 174 miles an hour, it was also the fastest production car in the world. But 20 years later, this was the fastest production car in the world, the 201-mile-an-hour F40. Built to celebrate 40 years of Ferrari, it was the last to be signed off by Enzo just a year before he died. And at £200,000, it was the most expensive new Ferrari yet, which seems a bit cheeky when you look up close, because it all seems, well, rather basic. But then that didn't worry Enzo, because what he wanted from what would turn out to be his last supercar was a racing car experience for the road. Spider's totally opposite to the 360, as you can imagine. It's really crude. You can see the bare carbon fibre monocoque. I've got a great seat and racing seat belts, but the steering wheel's all canted away at the top. The pedals are offset. It's a real old-fashioned Ferrari. But behind me, I know there's nearly 500 horsepower to be unleashed. Just driving at 3,000 RPM, it's like a shopping car. It's got no fear factor at all, but I know that if I light up those turbos, it's going to explode onto the straight. And there's no lag, there's no sudden surge of power, it's just instantly there. The chassis seems really instantly inspiring, it sits steady, there's no roll, it's got real Ferrari racing car breeding. Heavy brake pedal, no assistance as there isn't with the steering either. There's no power help for you in this Ferrari. Turn into this tighter corner, will it slide or won't it? How much power can I feed in? Now go on, Tim, give it a bit more. Now that back's trying to wriggle away from me. But you can feel it beginning to go and just attack the opposite lock. It's not the sort of car you feel you want to allow to go big sideways. If you did that, it's going to be gone.
But going one better than the F40 in third place is this, the 250 LM. With its mid-engine V12, it was introduced to replace the 250 GTO in the production car class, which it did very successfully. But it also won Le Mans outright in 1965 when the factory's official prototypes broke down. And despite this one being worth a nail-biting £1.5 million, it is still raced today.
But more of you, it seems, are swayed by TV appearances than you are by Le Mans victories, because our number 2 car, the nation's penultimate favourite Ferrari, is in fact an 80s stateside TV star. I am, of course, talking about the 308 or 328 series cars. But if you've no idea what I'm talking about, here's a really heavy hint.
So apart from its appearance on Magnum, what is it about this Ferrari that makes it worthy of being the nation's number 2? Well, we sent our resident Tom Selleck fan to find out.
At long last, I've become Mrs. Magnum, if only for one day. But there's more to this Ferrari than just its TV appearances. For starters, it's the Ferrari that I, and I dare say many of you, grew up with. The first time I saw one, red instantly became my favourite colour. Its roaring V8 became my favourite tune, and Pininfarina became my favourite designer. Unlike so many iconic sports cars from yesteryear, the 328 is not just a pretty shape on a decrepit old chassis. It was, and still is, a bona fide driver's car. However, the 328's real trump card was that it was what Maranello desperately needed it to be. Easy to drive, so that any old American with a Hawaiian shirt and a penchant for flip-flops wouldn't be at risk of serious injury. That said, it was definitely built for the Italian physique. But the cramped cabin didn't deter buyers. By the time production stopped in 1989, nearly 20,000 had been sold.
So, what's at number 1? What have you voted as the nation's favourite Ferrari? Well, let's just remind ourselves of the £12 million worth of Maranello magic we've already unveiled. At number 10, you chose my first love, the Dino. At 9 came the World Championship-winning P4. At 8, we were all won over by the stunning California Spider. But number 7 went to the £5 million 250 GTO. At 6, there's my current favourite, the 360 Modena. At 5,
Tom's favourite, the Daytona. And at number 4, the F40. But fast as it is, it lost out to the Le Mans winning 250 LM in third. And pipping that was Vicky's 308 328 series. So, is this the number 1? Ferrari's latest £420,000 export, the 220-mile-an-hour Enzo? Or could it be Schumacher's latest trophy-winning wheels, the 2003 World Championship Formula One car?
Well, it's neither of those. Our viewers have turned to another TV star as their favourite, and it's a name that evokes the very essence of Ferrari pedigree. Your number 1 is the...
Testarossa.
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 Which, to be honest, we found, well, a little disappointing.
I mean, I never did understand what these slats were all about.
And I always thought the wheels were a little bit puny.
As for these rear haunches, they remind me of 80s shoulder pads. I was never a fan.
But you voted for it, so I had to go and drive it.
Back in the early 80s, Ferraris were selling well, but in the bedroom wall poster stakes, they came a poor second to the Lamborghini Countach. In 1985, the Testarossa was to change all that. Its flat 12 engine delivered 380 horsepower, and Pininfarina created an unforgettable 6-foot-wide body to clothe it. Oh, and its starring role in Miami Vice didn't harm its popularity either.
To be honest, the Testarossa is always a surprising joy to drive. It's never quite the car expected. Fantastic all-round visibility makes it a real everyday usable Ferrari. The driving position isn't that bad. There's some small adjustment in the steering and this gives you a good position. However, the steering is truck-like heavy at low speeds. But once you start winding it up, it gets lighter and really comes alive. And of course, when you fire up the flat 12, well, the sounds come.
So there you have it. We always think we know best. Well, perhaps we don't.
You, the nation, voted the Testarossa your favourite Ferrari.
And we can't argue with that. See you next year.